Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Redemption in a Worthy World in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 46, Lost and Found. PT1 Tough as Nails. Ino Yamanaka was dragging herself through taijutsu forms with an equally reluctant Shikamaru under Asuma-sensei's direction when she heard Sakura's familiar laughter. It so distracted her that she failed to dodge Shikamaru's follow-up strike and took a punch on her ulnar nerve, sending tingles through her arm. She dropped back and held up a hand in the unison sign. I yield. Her teammate accepted it. What a drag. Sensei, do we really have to go through this? Neither of us will need taijutsu in the Inashikacho formations, so why bother? Asuma took a deep pull of his cigarette to hide his irritation. That may be true, but too much specialization will leave you vulnerable when out of your element. That's why I had Koji try to break out of Ino's mind entrapment techniques before this. They looked over at the drowsy Akimichi boy. Meat, he muttered as Ino scoffed. Really, it had almost been too easy to use the smell of barbecue to put him under. Oh hey, Team 7's back, said Shikamaru in an entirely too casual voice. I heard they had their first mission out of the village today. You three should go catch up, see what the experience was like, said Asuma. Think of it as gathering intel, he added as Ino's face twisted up. The desire to see Sasuke warred with her pride, since Sakura now technically had more experience as a ninja than her. Huh, there's Team 7, said a sleepy Koji, stumbling forward from where Asuma had not so gently nudged him awake. Let's go say hello. He moved off with Shikamaru, and Ino was dragged in their wake by the mantra Asuma had drilled into them for the past few weeks, stick together. Soon enough, they'd reached hearing range as Naruto called a greeting, only to shrink back when he realized Ino was behind them. She couldn't see Sasuke at all. Hey Naruto, Sakura, greeted her Nara teammate. Heard you guys had your first mission out of the village, wanted to see if you had any advice. Asuma-sensei's going to be taking us out guarding some banker in Katsuhiro Town, so it'll probably be boring. Hey, that leaves plenty of time for cloud watching, said Sakura with a smile that made Ino's gut stab out in jealousy. The pink-haired girl turned to Naruto, but Ino could tell the other girl was looking at her out of the corner of her eye. What advice could we give Team 10, Naruto? Karin. She drifted aside to reveal a red-haired girl with a shocked expression behind her rectangular glasses glancing between Team 10 and Sakura. Well, I'm not a ninja, so I can't really give any advice. Naruto chuckled and leaned into her. Hey, you've flown on a minor god, met a bunch of Umbu Black Ops and broke their knees, not to mention learned how to walk on water in a few hours. You're totally a ninja, I mean, if you wanna be, he ended awkwardly, but Karin shrugged. You're making me sound way cooler than I was. You guys mostly just carried me and did all the fighting. Sorry, interjected Koji, but who are you, exactly? Karin turned nearly as crimson as her hair and bowed. This allowed Ino to get a glimpse of the baby blue bow running through her otherwise plain hairstyle. I'm Karin Uzumaki, it's nice to meet you. She's my cousin, beamed Naruto, which garnered some incredulous looks, but he kept going. Sensei, Sakura, Sasuke, and I all went to the hidden grass and kicked a bunch of butt, so she came back with us cause the hidden leaf is much better. Karin made a face behind him which spoke of deep skepticism. Speaking of which, where is Sasuke anyway? Asked Ino, trying for casual interest and missing by a mile. Karin looked to her left at empty space and squeaked when Sakura stepped on her toe. He died, she said flatly, the twitching at the corners of her mouth betraying the obvious lie. Jumped in front of Naruto and got pincushioned by the grass ninja we were fighting, it was all horribly tragic. Naruto let out a fake sob and began wailing into his hands. He died so young, all his dreams unrealized. What a tragedy. Fine, don't tell me, snapped Ino. Are you going to give us advice, or not? The three children huddled together, whispering long enough that Shikamaru's head turned up to watch the sky and Koji pulled out a bag of chips from somewhere. Ino gritted her teeth. They were messing with her and she hated it. Sakura really had become an arrogant bitch, so different from the sweet little girl she remembered. It was probably all Naruto's fault, everyone knew he was a bad influence. Her train of thought halted as the idea hit her. She knew from rumors that Team 7 was basing itself as a mixed unit, with one genjutsu user to cover their backline, which, looking at Naruto's calloused hands, meant it had to be Sakura. Pretending to fiddle with the length of her ponytail, she moved through several signs. Mind infiltration jutsu. She'd meant to aim at Sakura, but trying to stay subtle meant her aim was off, and she hit Naruto instead. She captured a fragment of thought. Indra-sensei told us to stay quiet about that before she recoiled with a cry of pain. Bad idea, Blondie. Her hands fell away from her ponytail, red and blistered, as if she'd been burned. The others turned to her and Sakura swore violently in a way Ino had never heard before. What the heck happened? Asked Shikamaru, his eyes wide. Psychostigmatic backlash, answered Sakura shortly. I set up defenses around Naruto's mind and Ino must have triggered them. That's tip number 1, never leave your mind unguarded. Here, Naruto held out his hands, which were glowing intermittently with green healing chakra. It's my fault, let me fix it. I could do it, said Karin hesitantly, only for the air to ripple next to her as Sasuke put a newly visible hand on her shoulder. You don't need to do that anymore, he said. No one expects you to, no matter what. Tip number 2, chattered Sakura as both Naruto and Sasuke wrapped Ino's hands in what felt like soothing water, and her teammates hovered. Make sure everyone knows at least a little medical ninjutsu. We patched ourselves up with medical supplies well enough, but Sasuke had this slash on the small of his back and I had to get it for him. Who were you fighting? Asked Koji as he waved Asuma over. Stone Chunin, mostly, commented Sasuke. Naruto, let go, you keep sputtering out and it's slowing the heal. If I do it myself, it'll go faster. But it's my dash. Shut up, said Sasuke and Sakura as they rolled their eyes simultaneously. Karin giggled and Shikamaru sighed. Sensei, Ino was trying to mess with people's minds again. Naruto let go and Ino suddenly realized Sasuke was holding her hands gently between hers. Sasuke, I knew you cared. No I don't, said the Uchiha flatly as he kept looking at her hands. He blinked and she realized his eyes were glowing red. Sakura, did Sensei ever say how he dealt with the toxic chakra corrosion from the hospital? Sakura paused in her recitation of how important it was for teams to stick together and frowned in thought. I think it went away on its own, why? Come check this out, he said. Well, both girls looked at each other with a mixture of trepidation and lingering hostility. Oh, for the love of the leaf, get over here, groaned Asuma as he incinerated his cigarette butt and bent down to look. Automatic genjutsu defenses I set up went off, said Sakura by way of explanation as Ino's sensei nodded. Ino, why were you trying to look into someone's mind? Your father and I have warned you over and over that these techniques are not to be abused. Ino wanted to writhe in embarrassment, but Sasuke wasn't letting go of her hand, so she settled for stamping her feet. They were being all secretive and whispering. She trailed off as all the reasons she had for invading Naruto's mind suddenly seemed so trivial. Sasuke snorted with derision. You're lucky all you got was a burned hand, it could have been worse. Asuma gave Sakura a newly appraising look. Just what kind of defenses did you put up? Irrelevant, said the Uchiha. Asuma-sensei, I know you can't see it, but most of the corrosive chakras confined to her hands. Sasuke looked her up and down and Ino ordinarily would have enjoyed being looked at like that by the boy she liked, but the red glow of the Sharingan and the distant way he spoke killed the moment. In your experience, with the application of healing chakra, would any corrosion reach her wider chakra system? Asuma pulled out and lit another cigarette with a flick of his thumb as Ino felt a frisson of alarm run up her spine. Nah, not this quickly, you did a great job responding, kid. Ever think about specializing in medical work? Sasuke gave her sensei a flat look, which the Sharingan enhanced to be twice as intimidating. Don't be ridiculous. Sakura bent over Sasuke's shoulder to point at an angry red line across her palm. Focus there, that looks nasty. Standing there, watching the casual intimacy Sakura displayed with the love of her life, Ino felt her anger boil back up in an instant. You're very cruel, Sakura. What? Oh, here we go, groaned Naruto as Shikamaru shrugged at a confused Karin. Did we do something wrong? Nah, said her cousin. Ino's just been nursing this grudge for years. Kmin, we were on our way to meet Indra-sensei at Sakura's fried chicken place. Koji, Shikamaru, you guys wanna come? Karen's new, so I'm trying to introduce her to more people, you know. Food? Of course, said Koji. Why not, said Shikamaru. It's not like hanging around to hear all this girl drama's going to be fun anyway. I think it's interesting, mumbled Karen as Koji reprimanded his friend. Behind them, Sasuke, trapped between Ino and Sakura, locked eyes with a grinning Asuma. Can I let go? He all but begged, but Asuma had no mercy as he pointed with his cigarette. Finish healing your patient, and work on your bedside manner. He deactivated the Sharingan and focused on the argument. When Sasuke's never shown even the slightest interest in you, just like he's never been interested in me. Right, Sasuke? I've got more important things to do than worry about dating, said Sasuke shortly as he poured chakra into Ino's hand, hoping to finish this as quickly as possible. I don't know about that, said his sensei as he strolled towards them alongside an equally curious Inoichi Yamanaka. Ino and Sasuke both turned white with terror. In fact, he said with a smirk, I'd say dating is one of the more important things a young ninja should be spending time at, besides training. Sensei, what are you doing? Wailed Naruto, a frantic look back over his shoulder at Sasuke, Sakura, and Ino. They're gonna explode or something. See Naruto, comments like that are exactly why you three should spend time on the dating scene, said Indra as Inoichi snorted and Asuma tried to hide his laughter. You should talk to someone who isn't on your ninja team. But I'm talking to Shikamaru and Koji right now. Protested the blonde. Sorry man, said Shikamaru, but I'm not interested. See, you're learning already, said Indra in a voice that was entirely too gleeful for his students' liking as Inoichi bent put a hand on his daughter's shoulder. Hey Blossom, what happened to your hand? Ino grimaced and opened her mouth, but Sakura beat her to it. It's my fault, Yamanaka-san. Ino was training with some of her mind displacement techniques and I forgot to shut down some of the nastier surprises I put around Naruto's mind when we were in the hidden grass. Sasuke chimed in. That idiot couldn't perform a genjutsu if his life depended on it. See Ino, said Asuma. I told you team strengths had to be evenly distributed. The blonde wasn't sure if she should be grateful to Sasuke and Sakura for covering for her, or angry that they felt they had to. She settled on, mildly affronted, and pulled her hand away the instant Sasuke's hand stopped glowing green. Thanks, she ground out, feeling her emotions knot themselves together in her stomach as she looked at Team 7. Don't mention it, said Sasuke shortly as his uncle leaned over and tapped Asuma on the shoulder with his stump. Actually, this is the perfect time, I'd been meaning to speak to you both Asuma-san, Inoichi-san. Would you care to join us at Hakubo's? Sakura says they have excellent fried chicken and we're trying to show Karen here around the leaf. Inoichi looked down at his daughter, gauging her emotional state, and he didn't need to use his clan jutsu to see how conflicted she was. What do you think, Ino? She twisted her lips in a way that made her look very much like her mother, chewing over the question before squaring her shoulders and looking him in the eye. Let's go, Dad. Teams 7 and 10 made their way through the maze of Konoha's residential districts following Naruto and Sakura as they pointed out landmarks, people they knew, or in Naruto's case, shops he'd been kicked out of. Granted, I did accidentally spill half a bucket of paint on Kato-san's sign, but Gigi made me clean it up the next day. Karen adjusted her glasses. Gigi? You have a grandfather. He means the Hokage, said Sasuke with a sigh. Hiruzen Sarutobi likes to pretend to be a grandfather to half the village, but especially with Naruto. He does that as a substitute for spending time with his actual family, said Asuma with a glance in the direction of the stone faces as Inoichi shared an awkward glance with Indra. Speaking of family, said the older Uchiha, trying to move past the awkward silence that had developed, Inoichi, you and Asuma were both in the village before my time, and to make a long story short, someone showed us a curious memory with a woman I did not recognize. Sakura, show them. His student's expression darkened slightly, just as Sasuke's did, and she looked at her sensei with doubt. Are you sure? I mean dash. Asuma-sensei was one of the 12 guardian ninja protecting the daimyo, and my dad's done all sorts of super secret work, snapped Ino. I mean, if you can't trust them, who can you trust? I trust you, piped up Naruto as Karen shook her head. How you still manage to trust people like this is amazing to me, Naruto. You'll get there one day, said Indra confidently. It's a process. Sakura, project the image, no need to mind walk. She nodded and soon a thin mist from her mouth darkened to take the form of a woman in a blue Uchiha kimono, with spiky hair that trailed down to the small of her back. Asuma breathed in sharply and coughed as the smoke from his cigarette entered his lungs in a rush. Koji clapped him on the back while Inoichi was careful to not react. That's Sayaka Uchiha, Fugaku's mother, and the clan head before him. She died just before the end of the Third Great Ninja War, so it's not surprising you never knew her. Who gave you this memory, and why? Manipulation, said Sasuke, his hands tightening into fists. This was part of a meeting between my parents, Naruto's mother, and this Sayaka Uchiha. The sender claimed the content of the meeting was irrelevant. Well, that's clearly trustworthy, drawled Shikamaru with deep skepticism as he shoved his hands into his pockets. Sasuke looked away as the image dissolved and Naruto dragged Karen and Koji ahead to dash inside of the restaurant. Yeah, he admitted. I guess not. You kids go ahead, said Inoichi, waving Ino forward towards the smell of deep fryers, which had her wrinkling her nose. Your teachers are going to decide how to split the bill, since two Uzumaki and an Akimichi are eating at once. The place will be cleaned out in an hour, said Asuma dryly as the children filed in and immediately began maneuvering for optimal seating arrangements. Indra tried to wink, though it was difficult to distinguish from normal blinking. Let's just say I'm glad to be taking a specialist Jonin's salary. Once the children were inside and Naruto had kicked up enough of a chatter that their conversation was difficult to hear, Indra's face returned to the serious expression it had borne earlier. I didn't show you both that image just to confirm Sayaka Uchiha's identity. The primary lineage scroll could have told me that. What I wanted to know was her personality, her attitude, how she commanded the Uchiha clan. Why ask about the whims of a dead woman, asked Asuma. I mean, she once read Genma and I the riot act when we stole peaches from the district's outskirts, but I couldn't give you any special insight. Because Sakura thinks, and I concur, that she used the Mangekyo Sharingan on her son, said Indra with no preamble. Inoichi's brow furrowed. How does dash? I make a point to be honest and open with my students about the issues they may face. Better to prepare them now, especially considering the kind of attention they'll attract. What about their childhood, countered Asuma, pointing his cigarette at Indra. You've gotta let them be actual kids instead of hanging all the world's responsibilities on their shoulders. They can't even drink yet. Indra jerked his thumb over his shoulder to indicate the restaurant. I'm taking them out to lunch and trying to get Konoha's three most stubborn teenagers to become emotionally vulnerable with someone besides each other. If that's not childhood, I don't know what is. What kind of childhood did you have, blurted Asuma, who was rewarded with the sight of Indra Uchiha visibly struggling for words. Inoichi, back me up here, you're still my case officer, right? But the Yamanaka clan head said nothing, frowning into the middle distance. This is disquieting indeed, Indra, but several things the village once wondered about now make a certain kind of sense. How reliable was that memory? Could it have been altered or manipulated? Perhaps Sakura mistook the full Tomo pattern for dash. She didn't, said Indra. As for the memory itself, I am reasonably sure it is unaltered in what it depicts. The absence of sound is the only notable difference, and I suspect whatever the Uchiha and Uzumaki were discussing was important indeed. Would the Yamanaka memory alteration dash? It would be on file, said Inoichi. Even for the blackest of black ops, the Yamanaka clan keeps its own records separate from those of the Hokage. Now Indra and Asuma both turned to look at him in astonishment. Seriously, blurted Asuma. Our clan has strict safeguards in place to prevent ourselves from going too far inside Konoha's walls, said Inoichi. The other Jonin nodded. Anything else weighty you wish to drop on us before we eat, Indra-san? The Uchiha shook his head. No, but suggestions on who else I should speak with would be welcome. My father likely wouldn't tell you even if he knew, said Asuma. Though Shimura Danzo might. Now it was the bearded man's turn to be stared at. Indra's expression suggested Asuma had just advised stripping naked and punching a beehive. Shimura Danzo hates my guts, said Indra. Still, mused Asuma. I've heard him get deep enough into his cups with Hiruzen to know that old man hates the idea of anyone else holding ominous secrets he doesn't know. Now while you two spooks muse on that, I'm going to go eat. With that parting shot, Asuma tossed away the remains of his cigarette, ground it into the dirt, and went inside. 20 minutes later, once their food had been delivered and the Akimiku Uzumaki feeding frenzy had subsided somewhat, Asuma leaned back and took a sip of his beer. So Indra, now that your team's proven themselves, what are your plans? We've got a bodyguard job outside the village next week, and I'm thinking about the Chunin exams in 4 months. What are the Chunin exams? Asked Karen around a drumstick. Shikamaru answered her. They're a semi-public assessment of each village's ninja teams, where genin battle each other in a variety of tests designed by each village, with varying degrees of lethality. Proctors then decide which students showed enough promise to be promoted to Chunin, who are small squad leaders and part of the larger armed forces each nation possesses. Honestly, Asuma-sensei, are you really thinking of putting us through those already? It sounds like such an ordeal. You guys need to learn proper teamwork, not just Ino ordering everyone around, and you, Shikamaru, need to show some initiative. The sage gave you that big brain for a reason and you should really try using it for something other than shogi. Besides, this year's exams will be in Konoha, so not only will you have proctors not actually out to kill you, but all 3 of you will be able to meet and interact with ninja teams from other nations. Indra emptied his own glass as memories of the Forest of Death and Orochimaru's fangs on his neck came rushing back to the front of his mind. Some of his disquiet must have showed on his face, because Naruto leaned sideways to affectionately headbutt him, drawing Indra out of the memories of when he'd been Sasuke Uchiha, in over his head. He ruffled Naruto's hair but Indra's face was still contemplative as he responded. Asuma makes a good point, but the Chunin exams aren't a walk in the park. The Second Hokage helped put them together as a form of proxy warfare that allowed nations to release tensions without wider-scale bloodshed. The exams were successful enough to become a mainstay, but the darker side to them has never gone away. Ah, Kmen-sensei, cheered Naruto as he punched the air several times. We kicked a bunch of Chunin and Umbu butt on our first mission. We can totally take a bunch of other genin. You had luck in addition to skill, said Indra as he stole some of Naruto's chicken and pointed it at him. And considering the incident you pulled with Tewa, I think it's best if the 3 of you spend some more time growing up before you take the Chunin exams. It's not an issue of how strong you are, or how well you work together as a team, it's a matter of emotional maturity. What if what happened in the hospital happens there? Sakura had to save both your butts, remember. Naruto's face fell while Team 10 looked on in silence. Indra's tone had not been especially harsh, but the rebuke was clear. Surprisingly, both Karen and Sasuke came to his defense as Sakura vanished from sight in a swirl of genjutsu. Well, I still don't think Naruto did anything wrong, said his cousin, throwing her head sideways to rip meat away from the bone, ignoring decorum entirely. I wouldn't say that, hedged Sasuke, but we've all learned from the experience so if something like that happens again, we'll all be ready. Okay, that's it, yelled Ino, slamming her hands down on the table and making the plates all leap an inch into the air. You guys been dancing around it all day, mind telling us what you actually did on this mission, besides bring back Naruto's cousin? Traveled with a couple of rogue shinobi, killed a few stone ninja, and caused a minor international incident I had to defuse, rattled off Indra as Team 7 looked guilty and Asuma raised an eyebrow. But considering how out of their league they were, my team did very well in difficult circumstances. It just means I want to take things slow for a bit. Ah, sensei, you do care, said Sakura as she reappeared and though the attempt at levity was a bit forced, it worked. With Inoichi's assistance, the conversation moved on to training methods. Soon enough, Teams 7 and 10 passed a raucous, but enjoyable afternoon as they rediscovered the potent eating rivalry between the Uzumaki and the Akimichi clans. In the end, despite Ino's protests that it wasn't ladylike, Karen had proven herself the victor, grinning sleepily as Indra carried her back to the Uchiha district. Team 10 bid them farewell at the gate to the Uchiha district, which still bore that name despite hosting ex-Root agents and the Sound Children who'd joined the Leaf. 2 of Indra's success stories were standing several houses down from the main thoroughfare and when Indra spotted them, he drifted over within earshot. While such emotional regulation techniques may be frowned upon, if you believe they will benefit your ongoing efforts, Shin and I can teach them to you. Thank you, Sai, said Yugo, bowing slightly to the shorter child. Good afternoon, Yugo, Sai, said Indra, waving his stump as Karen clung to his back like a limpet. It's good to see you both. How are you? Team 7 did their normal dance of greeting with the two orphans, which for Naruto and Sakura consisted of variations on emotionally well-meaning but overwhelming handshakes, while Sasuke simply inclined his head. Shin and I are acceptable, though combat deficient in many respects, said Sai in the monotone that characterized so many of Danzo's victims. Dr. Ontoba is hopeful that the list of drugs he received from a physician in Sunagakure will provide some alleviation of my brother's symptoms. Glad to hear it, said Indra, and he meant it. In his first life, he and Sai had been perhaps too similar to ever be entirely comfortable around each other, but as the Shadow Hokage and the head of Umbu, they had eventually settled into a mutual respect that had lasted for decades. To see this younger version of Sai, even saved so early from Root, still struggling with emotion, had Indra realize how much emotional investment Naruto and Sakura had done with him. And to see Yugo, acting as the emotional rock for dozens of similarly adrift Root or Sound children, had made Indra's heart swell. As I said, if either of you need anything, please let me know, since it's my fault you're both here. I would hardly say it is a fault, said Sai, though his tone had the subtle currents that Indra knew from 20 years of familiarity meant an attempt at humor was imminent. On the contrary, the lodgings and the company your district has provided are a significant improvement on our previous accommodations. Even that minor rebuke of Root, Indra knew, was a hard-fought victory. Sasuke stepped forward and offered his hand, which Sai shook. Glad to hear it, both of you. Yugo stared at Sasuke's offered hand and took it tentatively, like the smaller Uchiha was going to explode. I do want to apologize for the damage to Dash. It doesn't matter, said Sasuke dismissively. Nobody got hurt, so it's fine. It's only money, right, uncle? He looked up at Indra, who felt his heart swell at how far Sasuke had come from the prickly child who'd stormed into his hospital room. And how far he still had to go. Right, he said, voice husky with emotion before he swallowed and returned to his normal register. It's no matter. Indra gave a half-smile he'd borrowed Fromi's husband and had never given back. Besides, since Konoha pays the Uchiha based on how many houses are being used, it's technically tax-deductible. The children all stared up at him with blank expressions before Indra shook his head. Never mind. Anyway, Yugo, this is Karen Uzumaki, Naruto's cousin. She'll be staying with us for the time being, but since your house has no other roommates, would you be willing to prepare a spare room, just in case she gets sick of us? It's possible, but he hesitated. I don't want to hurt her. Indra chuckled. Karen may not look it, but she's one of the toughest people I've ever known. She's got that Uzumaki determination in her, just like Naruto. Just a little more subtle, is all. Yugo's face cleared, doubts appeased for now. Understood, Indra Uchiha. Thank you again. He bowed and moved off along with Sai, the smaller boy pulling a book out of his back pocket as several birds fluttered down to nest in Yugo's hair. Sakura folded her arms and muttered something about animal attitudes while Naruto looked up at his sensei. Did you really mean that, Indra-sensei? About us being tough? Indra waved his stump. How do you think I lost this? My husband and I blew each other's arms off, and with the help of a skilled medical ninja, we both walked away. Sakura shrunched up her face. Grown UPS are weird. Well, hopefully dating won't be nearly as calamitous for you as it was for me, said Indra dryly. That's why I want you three to take advantage of the 4 months between now and the Chunin exams to reach out, see who you might like. Consider this your sensei paying forward some very hard-learned lessons. It was so much easier when you were just teaching us how to be ninja, complained Sasuke. True, said his uncle. But being a good person is far harder than being a good ninja and will make you happier, I think. Team 7 spent the rest of the week intermittently training, and when Karen insisted, allowing her to tag along as they chased Tora the cat across Konoha's rooftops for a D-rank mission. While her sensory abilities initially overwhelmed her in the densely populated streets of Konoha, Karen adapted remarkably quickly. Soon enough, she was leading the chase, pinpointing Tora whenever the Damiyos cat escaped out of Team 7's sight lines. For his part, Indra spent the rest of the week ruminating on if it was wise to ask Danzo about their Sayaka Uchiha mystery. He'd already asked for a great deal from the head of Root and already owed him one favor, which Indra was sure he would cash in at the worst possible time. Unfortunately, Inoichi wasn't available to nag/ask for assistance, because of something classified he refused to discuss on the rare occasions Indra caught him walking home from work. So a blood-drenched Izumo found Indra late one spring night annotating a letter to one Anoka Uzumaki on what Madame Juo's letter had described as Summoning Island. Indra was annoyed that the hawk he had summoned knew exactly where that was and he did not, but was busy tying the scroll to Karika's leg when Izumo landed in the garden with a puff of dirt and a considerable spattering of blood. Indra had already drawn a kunao before his brain caught up and he lowered it slightly. "Rado? What's wrong?" The gate guard's expression meant nothing good. "Cat and a pair of riders arrived at the gates 5 minutes ago with some scrolls they said were for you. It's not pretty." Indra tied off the knot and waved a grumbling Karika away. "Let's go." Once they were away from the house, Indra activated his lightning armor and streaked across the rooftops like a low-flying comet, outpacing Izumo by a factor of 10 and setting more than a few washing lines aflame in his wake. He skidded to a stop to see several Konoha-chan tending to a grievously wounded Yojao, her cat mask discarded several feet away as her blood stained the soil. Still, she was conscious and gave Indra a grin as he approached. "Why the long face? I'm still alive, aren't I?" "Barely," muttered one of the other shinobi as he wrapped bandages around Yojao's chest, the tatters of her armor and clothes discarded to the side. "The hell's happened to you?" "Itaki Uchiha," mumbled one of the men slumped forwards on his steaming horse. Indra was at his side in an instant, naked sword blazing with chakra as his Sharingan scanned the Trilene and the ninja around Yojao bristled. "Where? Did he follow you here?" "Mostly," admitted the man who Indra vaguely recognized as one of Kojimo Hakuo's bounty hunters. "He ran once Konoha advance teams showed up and brought us here." He slumped forward, woozy with blood loss, and Indra ran an electrical charge through the man to shock him back to alertness. "Kojimo's dead then." The man nodded and leaned back, fingers fumbling at his saddlebag, which Indra deftly opened to reveal 2 blood-spattered redwood cylinders. "I'm Fujo, squad leader." Madame Juo said, "You wanted these," he croaked as Indra drew them out of the bag in wonder. "Emma's got the last one, plus a fake." Kotetsu the gate guard approached, his clipboard discarded in favor of a flashlight in one hand and a naked sword in the other, and by its light, Indra unfurled the first scroll to reveal an intricate array of lines, characters, and decorative Uchiha fans, yellowed with age. The secondary lineage scroll, he breathed in wonder. "An Itaki Uchiha killed 24 of us to get it back," said the man, glaring at Indra. "So you'd better fucking pay up, otherwise there's a lot of families who'll come after your head." "Rest," soothed Indra, putting a hand on the man's forehead and applying a subtle genjutsu through eye contact. "Your service and sacrifices will not go unrewarded." The man slumped against his horse, asleep, and Indra stepped back, expression stern. "I'll get this one to the hospital, Kotetsu. Can you take her?" The gate guard nodded and motioned for one of the other Konoha-chanin, who relieved Emma of her bag and draped the exhausted woman over their shoulders as Indra copied the motions with Fujo. A Numbu agent with a familiar face mask appeared in a swirl of leaves and shooed away 2 of the Konoha-chanin as they crouched over Yojao, carefully replacing the cat mask on her face, for all the good it did. "Cat? Cat, stay conscious." "Oh, hey new beetle. How's it going?" She trailed off while the bandages across her chest went from pink to full-on red as her wounds reopened. New Beetle pulled a syringe of something from a thigh pocket and jammed it into Cat's chest with enough violence that several of the Chunin jerked backwards and Indra winced. They waited for a breathless minute, then Cat gasped in shock and ripped the mask away again as the jackknifed to her feet, hands lashing out wildly as she screamed. Indra and New Beetle held their hands out placatingly as Yojao's eyes dilated, sweat pouring off of her as the adrenaline shot sent her endocrine systems into overdrive, keeping her awake. "Itake, you fucker, I'll use your guts for dental dams, I'll dash." But whatever further insults she was about to sling were stilled as Beetle held up the cat mask, and her gloved hands traced their way over her face, before she cursed violently in a dialect from southern Takigakur. "You're safe, soothed New Beetle as Indra deactivated his Sharingan. "You're in Konoha. Now, let's get you to a hospital." "Yeah," panted Yojao. "That's probably a good idea." Eagle died at roughly 12 degrees south, 57 west of Konoha, in the fork of a tree. "Log it and send dash." "We'll send a team," said Indra, hand going out to steady the woman as she swayed dangerously. "Anything else critical before we start sealing all those holes in you?" Kat chuckled weakly. "Keep a few of them at least, hey, and Irie planning on a family at some point." "Critical information, Yojao," said Indra, eyes locked on hers. "Anything important?" "Irie brother really wanted those scrolls," she slurred. "What's in 'em?" Indra brushed matted strands of purple hair away from her forehead. "The truth." New Beetle shouldered the semi-conscious Umbu onto his shoulders and vanished in a shunshin as several moments later, Indra and Kotetsu followed. Halfway across Konoha, New Beetle peeled away towards the stone faces and the Umbu hospital hidden underneath while Indra and Kotetsu delivered their charges into the competent care of the Konoha emergency room. Once their charges were wheeled away on stretchers, Kotetsu shot Indra an inquisitive look. "So, care to tell me what's in those scrolls besides cryptic Uchiha bullshit?" Indra pulled the secondary lineage scroll out from under his stump and motioned the Chunin aside, clearing several tiles of white linoleum as he unfurled the scroll, which in his time had been destroyed utterly by his Kirin against Itachi. The cracked parchment made ominous noises as it spread across the floor, but the softly glowing Uchiha fan at the bottom center was evidence the ancient sealing jutsu within it still worked. As a backup, the secondary lineage scroll was not as durable, or as well protected as the primary, but in some respects it was better. More adaptable and, importantly for Indra, easier to trick. He bit his thumb and placed his hand on the central Uchiha fan. The symbol absorbed his blood instantly as he spoke quietly, aware of the half-dozen occupants of the emergency room who were crowding around in curiosity. Lineage scroll, update bloodline, Fugaku Uchiha. Bastard son, Indra Uchiha. Black ink inched away from the kanji for Fugaku Uchiha, moving across to link a blank circle, then dipping down to form the symbols for Indra Uchiha. The man in question nodded. Update Indra Uchiha, designate Bloodline Guardian. The title scrawled itself below Indra's name, and the characters stained themselves a deep red as they finished drying, the same color as Indra's blood. He took a deep breath, feeling the question that burned within him, begging to be let out, and hesitated as he felt the eyes on him. Was this the right time? The right way? Obviously his Naruto would have done things differently, but he wasn't Naruto. Lineage scroll, update bloodline, Uchiha. Confirm deaths. There was silence as the sealing jutsu within the scroll, as well as more esoteric powers within the yellowed parchment, drew upon the open wound in Indra's thumb. He gritted his teeth as the wound began to gush blood far in excess of the small break in his skin should have produced. Every last drop spread across the Uchiha fan before sinking in without a trace. Kotetsu lifted a corner of the scroll to peer at the spotless linoleum beneath. "Man, you weren't kidding Uchiha, this is some serious shit. My ex-wife and I had to try and remake one of these from scratch when we had our daughter," said Indra, thinking of the countless hours spent wrestling with scrolls and consulting the Hyuga clan scrolls for reference until Karen had taken pity on him and made one herself as a belated wedding present. Back when Hinata had been kind to them. He shook the stray thought away and remembered where he was and who could hear him. "It's very old jutsu," he said. "Older than the village, back when so many children were born and died the chroniclers could not write the names for weight of grief. It was a line from The Forging of Clans, a kabuki play he'd attended on stakeout for months in his first life, protecting the daimyo of the Land of Fire. Even without the Sharingan he likely could still recite most of it from memory, down to the understudy's lisp. Indra looked down to see black characters forming across dozens of lines, spelling out the same year of death, 58 me. The modern era, how quaint the description was. Indra thought about the technological boom that had occurred under Naruto and Sarada's reigns as Hokage, the apartments behind the stone faces that some, Sasuke included, thought ruined the view. The Kara Crisis, Sarada's clan revival project across all 5 great nations. The Confederation of Minor Nations, and the Otsutsuki Wars to blast them all into irrelevancy and ash. The future, with all its promise and all its horror, that even now he was working to both cement and deny in equal measure. The secondary lineage scroll glowed softly to signify it was finished, and Indra looked down to see a scroll now covered with far more black ink than there had been when he'd opened it minutes before. The question was on the tip of his tongue. Fuck it, Indra thought. Lineage scroll, which Uchiha are still alive? The scroll didn't react and Indra made a face. Lineage scroll, ignore death dates from the primary scroll, update based on Sharingan genetic markers. The emergency room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop as black ink blazed gold on one branch after the other. Sasuke Uchiha B, 50 Mi, D. Itachi Uchiha B, 45 Mi, D. Perpetrated the Uchiha clan massacre in 58 Mi, became a missing nin. Indra Uchiha B, Mi, D. Then came gasps as unfamiliar names lit up. Obito Uchiha, hero of the Battle of Konobe Bridge, granted his Sharingan to Kakashi Hatake. B, 36 Mi, D, 49 Mi. Miyake Uchiha B, 49 Mi, D, 49 Mi. Stillborn. Shibaki Uchiha B, 42 Mi, D, 58 Mi. Takeru Uchiha B, 48 Mi, D, 58 Mi. Stillborn. The final gut punch was perhaps the most obvious of all, as the name near the very top of the scroll, larger than all the rest, flickered between gold and black for several seconds before subsiding to darkness. Madara Uchiha, first to awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan, founder of the Hidden Leaf Village. B-25 Mi, D, 12 Mi, 48 Mi. In the silence, Indra's voice could be heard by every person in the room, boiling with vindication and a rage stored up over 3 years. Fucking called it. Chapter 47, Lost and Found PT2, Smoke Signals. Sasuke's first half Alcip thought was huh? Followed by, who's shaking me? Sasuke, 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 chanted an equally disheveled Karen, who was shaking him so hard his head rattled back and forth on his neck. I'm up, he grumbled, waving her away, and he rubbed his eyes free of grit and turned on the lamp at his bedside. What is it? Your uncle wants us downstairs, she said, apprehension all over her features. He said it was important enough to wake you up. Sasuke looked over at the clock and saw it was 4:34 in the morning. He made a face as he slid out of bed, but grabbed his ninja pouch just in case. Did he say anything else? No, but he had that grim look, like when stuff gets serious. Sasuke shrugged. He always looks like that, Karen, it's an Uchiha thing. She made a noise of disbelief, but they stumbled out of his room and down the stairs, where Naruto, and surprisingly, the third Hokage, were seated in front of the kitchen table. Naruto was eagerly pulling a cup of tea towards himself, while the Sandaime had abandoned his in favor of his pipe, which already filled the room with the smell of sandalwood. Indra looked up from where he'd been muttering over a wrinkled yellow parchment and gave what Sasuke could tell was a forced smile. Thank you, Karen. Both of you please, come see this. No need to worry, you're not in any trouble. I've heard that before, said Karen with a huff. Usually right before someone got in trouble. None of you are going to be in trouble, said the third Hokage with a more genuine look of kindness. Really, we could use your help with this mystery Indra-san and I have on our hands. He extended one wrinkled appendage. It's a pleasure to meet you formally, Karen Uzumaki. Where have the tides taken you, my dear? She jolted at the use of the phrase, but Sasuke awkwardly patted her on the back and she strode forward, clasping the Hokage's hand in between the sleeves of her slightly too long pajamas. It's nice to meet you, Lord Hokage, but I have traveled far from the rocky shore and currents of my birth, son of the leaf. The Hokage chortled. So polite too. I must say, it's nice to meet someone who remembers the old ways. Karen looked at the floor and shuffled a little. Not very many of them, though. Well, Konoha will let you have plenty of time to relearn them. Who knows what's hidden away in those old library books? But speaking of hidden things. He turned to Sasuke and the younger Uchiha felt the weight in the room increase with the focus of the Hokage's gaze. Sasuke, come look at what your uncle has managed to find. Indra shook his head as Sasuke slid into a chair. I made an educated guess, Sarutobi. Katsumbu and the Kojumo hunter group were the ones that paid the price. The Hokage gave Indra a flat look. The Leaf frowns upon affiliated shinobi hiring independent operatives for missions off the books. That's why we have the Umbu. Please, we both know why that was impossible. Just be grateful I'm letting you sit at this table, Sarutobi. Excuse me? Both adults blinked and looked over to see Naruto frowning at the yellowed parchment spread out below them. Isn't this just a busted-up version of the clan scrolls back in there? He jerked his thumb over his shoulder in the direction of the clan head's office. I don't see what's so special about it. Indra held out his thumb, which Sasuke noticed was stained red with blood, and shook it so the drops fell onto the parchment. The younger Uchiha tried to cry out, but the words died in his throat as the Uchiha crest began to glow. His sensei smirked ever so slightly. Secondary lineage scrolls are less durable, yes, but they have other jutsu woven into their creation to compensate. They are difficult to create, even for seal masters, murmured the Hokage absently as he took a pull on his pipe. And very rare. Sasuke's mouth dropped open as blood-red characters formed on the Uchiha fan. Restore previous alterations, Indra Uchiha? Confirm, said Indra. Lineage scroll, ignore death dates from the primary scroll, update based on Sharingan genetic markers. Sasuke was frozen to the spot as death dates were crossed out and names blazed gold, one after another. Obito Uchiha, hero of the Battle of Konobe Bridge, granted his Sharingan to Kakashi Hatake. B. 36 Mi, D. 49 Mi. Miyake Uchiha B. 49 Mi, D. 49 Mi. Stillborn. Shibaki Uchiha B. 42 Mi, D. 58 Mi. Takeru Uchiha B. 48 Mi, D. 58 Mi. Stillborn. What does this mean? He asked the room. Someone lied, said Karen, her voice shaking with sudden anger. Sasuke looked over as her hand latched onto his shoulder and squeezed with astonishing force. Those children supposedly died at birth, except the scroll says they're still alive. She looked up at Indra and the Hokage, who seemed like statues as they stared down at the parchment. Can the scroll be wrong? It can be tricked, admitted Indra. But it is manipulation by omission. An Uchiha cannot be erased from the scroll entirely, I think. They all looked at the third Hokage, who was staring at the top of the scroll with bulging eyes. Madara Uchiha, said Naruto. His name's all flickering and stuff, what does that mean? It means Madara's soul is no longer on this earth, but part of his body lives on, said Indra with a sigh. Sarutobi, now do you see why I was so insistent that we destroy every record of how to perform the Edo Tensei? The Hokage's face had gone pale and Karen frowned as she adjusted her glasses. His chakra signature's going all funny, what dash? Indra put 2 fingers in his mouth and whistled, piercingly loud in the small room, and 2 Umbu emerged from the shadows, causing all the children to jump. Crane, pheasant. The tall man in the pheasant mask reached a glowing green hand down and drove a palm strike into the third Hokage's chest, forcing the old man to gasp for air and begin to wheeze. I'm fine, he managed before degenerating into another round of heavy coughing as Sasuke activated his Sharingan to see for himself. The Hokage was not fine by any stretch, even with his limited perception. His chakra was sluggish and pooled in his limbs, moving away from his heart, where it should have been strongest. Sasuke frowned at the man 60, if not 70 years his senior. Did you just have a heart attack? Sarutobi shook his head, but Naruto had already launched off his chair and was clinging to the old man's leg. Don't die, Jiji, he pleaded. You're a great Hokage. Sasuke and Karen saw Indra wince and wave his hand to indicate this was not so. The other children still managed to drag Naruto back to his seat in time for the leader of their village to regain his breath. Crane, pheasant, he said in a husky voice. Leave us. The Umbu looked at each other, then at Indra, and exchanged a series of hand signs that Sasuke's eyes could memorize, but not decipher. The masked ninja nodded and disappeared into the shadows again as Karen's suspicious gaze followed them. As I was saying, said Indra as he pointed at Madara's flickering name. I lobbied hard to ensure the reanimation jutsu was erased from existence because otherwise, it would be the easiest way for any number of monsters from the past to return to trouble the living once more. He saw all 3 of the children's eyes light up and held up his hand to forestall them. But it is kinjutsu, forbidden under penalty of death. Indra warned the Hokage. Because it requires a living sacrifice to return the dead to this world, said Indra flatly. It is a perversion of all laws of nature, a violation of not one, but 3 souls, and it was created by your esteemed mentor, Tobirama Senju. He stared at the third Hokage. It was the testing of this jutsu which contributed to the first great ninja war, and part of why Orochimaru was so reviled. But Dash started Sasuke before they were falling over each other as they tried to protest. You could bring my parents back. Yeah, my mom too. Both are moms. What makes you think they would want to come back? Knowing the price you would so carelessly pay, said the Hokage, and they felt his disappointment more keenly than Indra's. That their children would carve away a piece of their soul, no, they would not want that at all. He shook his head gravely. Indra-san, your point is well made, but the Edo Tensei carries too much potential to be discarded out of hand. The Great Scroll has lain undisturbed in the Hokage's vault for decades, and it will stay there. Indra frowned, but said nothing as he leaned back over the scroll. Secondary lineage scroll, can these Uchiha be located? The characters, insufficient access, appeared on the fan. Insufficient dash, Indra broke off as Sasuke stabbed himself in the hand and let some of his blood fall onto the fan, glowing healing chakra already sealing the wound. Secondary lineage scroll, this is clan head Sasuke Uchiha. Can these Uchiha be located? An affirmative chime from the scroll as Naruto sniggered slightly at the affronted look on Indra's face. Well, where are they, then? Light exploded from the scroll into Sasuke's face, blinding him, and he fell backwards off his chair as Naruto caught him with a sliding dive. He blinked the spots out of his eyes and looked up. Red smoke rose from the secondary lineage scroll in a thick tower, drifting straight up through the ceiling. He pointed. Do you guys see that? Sasuke scrambled to his feet and dragged Naruto up as the others looked back and forth, following the direction of his gesture. Sasuke, there's nothing we can see, said the third Hokage carefully. Is it perhaps Sharingan specific? Indra activated his own Manjikyo Sharingan in a swirl of color. I see nothing, when my ocular dojutsu is several stages more advanced than Sasuke's. What do you see? Red smoke, coming up from the lineage scroll. Sasuke shrugged, but a slow smile began to spread across his face as he raced away and upstairs, with the others in hot pursuit. He swung around the banister to see the smoke column still going up, as though solid objects were of no concern. With Indra, Naruto, and Karin behind him, Sasuke wrenched open the sliding glass door onto the balcony and leapt up to the roof, where the smoke split into trails, far above him in the sky. 5 of the trails arced down as he watched, one plunging back into the roof towards his uncle, and another anchoring itself in his chest. He poked the wisp of red smoke that drifted just above his heart and found it parted at his touch, the entire trail unraveling while the rest of the smoke remained. Smoke that was landing in areas behind the house he couldn't see through the trees and walls. Still, they all landed decisively within the Leaf Village and did not deviate an inch. Sasuke looked up again and saw 3 trails fly away westward, one sputtering and frail, while the other 2 were just as deep red and clearly defined as the 3 inside the Uchiha district. His eyes began to water and Sasuke noticed that he had not blinked in some time. Afraid he would lose this sight, he squeezed his eyes shut while fixing the image in his mind and opened them again to reveal the same smoke trails. He began to grin. They're really alive, he whispered. They're really alive. SKE? Sasuke. The Uchiha heir blinked again and saw that Indra was bent down in front of him, eyes full of concern as red smoke drifted up from his own chest. Sasuke waved away the trail as he put a hand on his senior's chest. Yes, uncle, I'm fine. More than fine actually. He jumped back down to the balcony and was gratified to see smiles spread across the Uzumaki and the Hokage's faces at the joy on his own. 3 of them are still in the village, can you believe that? There was a blur of movement and Indra's scabbard sword had flung itself into his hand, leaving a small hole in the floor where it had shot straight up from the umbrella stand. What do you mean, they're in the village? Sasuke ran to his desk and began scribbling on an open and mostly empty scroll. Whatever it was before didn't matter as he sketched a loose outline of what he'd seen. 3 of the smoke signals I saw landed right here inside the Uchiha district, uncle. They dash. His hands slowed, then stopped as Karin and Naruto looked confused. Huh, they chorused in unison. The only people who live in the Uchiha district are either retired Umbu, or Dash. The thought hit him like a poisoned kunao. The children kidnapped by Orochimaru. If he wasn't already sitting in his desk chair, Sasuke would have collapsed. By the sage, whispered the Hokage as Indra's face went blank. It's not possible. Who cares about what's possible, you stupid old man, snapped Karen, jabbing a finger into his stomach. It's what's happening right now. Hey, said Naruto, trying to pull his cousin away. How could he have possibly known about that? Heck, Indra-sensei said he only had a guess and needed the scroll and stuff to confirm it. He turned to the adults, who were staring off into the middle distance. Could Itachi have had something to do with this? 49, 42, 48, muttered Indra as his fingers flicked through countdowns. Working backwards from the massacre, he trailed off. Naruto turned to the Hokage, who had dropped his pipe. Jiji. I may kill shinobi, but I never waste them. That's what he once said to me. The Hokage blinked as Naruto grabbed the front of his robe. Who? Orochimaru? Itachi. I think there's one other suspect, said Indra, still with that terrifying calm. Sasuke, were there any other smoke trails? The younger Uchiha nodded and described the three he'd seen, one flickering and insubstantial as Naruto ran downstairs and returned with the lineage scroll held carefully between his hands. Okay, so one of M's Itachi for sure, the other one's this Obito fella, but who's the last one? The eyes of a sage, stolen by Madara, said Indra. It's a long, complicated, and horrific story, but all you need to know is that they likely still contain some of his chakra. Which now that I think about it, is probably resurrection plan number 2. Karen and Naruto shrugged at each other, then turned to Sasuke, who was weeping quietly as his joy was replaced with the same brain-blasting realization the adults were feeling. They were out there all this time, just like you uncle, he said. They were out there while I was laughing and eating and training and dash. Sasuke dash. I can't believe I was enjoying myself while they were dash. Naruto slapped his friend across the face and the pain forced Sasuke to pay attention as his head jerked to the side. Naruto's eyes were bright blue as they glared back into his own. They're safe now. Indra-san and Umbu-san, and Kat-san all got them out and stabbed the shit out of Orochimaru too. He can't hurt them again. But I dash. You were a child, said Indra as he stepped forward to drag Naruto, Sasuke, and Karen into a hug, enveloping them in his dark blue cloak. This was not your responsibility, even as nominal clan head. Not even I knew anything beyond vague suspicions. Sasuke felt his uncle's lips kiss his brow in benediction, a silent plea to calm down. We have already won, said Indra. We have brought them home, where they are safe and loved, and Orochimaru is gone to a place of far greater punishment than we can inflict upon his wretched soul. Sasuke took a shaky breath and felt the arms close around him in the dark, smelled the people he'd come to know and trust. Karen, Indra-sensei, Naruto. Okay, he found himself saying. They're okay, you're okay, I'm okay. He said it like a mantra, like something to ward away evil spirits, and gradually, found that if it was not entirely true, it was also not entirely false. You guys saved me too, said Karen as Indra let his cloak fall away and stood up, wiping at his face. So that's one more good thing, even if it seems like your security sucks just as much as the grass village, right Lord Hokage? But the third Hokage was no longer there. The main doors of the Umbu headquarters beneath Hokage Mountain were 5-inch thick hardened steel, with a core of ironwood grown from one of the first Hokage's own trees and layered with more protective seals than even the Konoha barrier walls. It took Hiruzen Sarutobi 6 seconds to burn a hole through them with the white-hot heat of the dragon flame bombs. His chakra did not pool sluggishly in his limbs now, it fairly boiled with his anger, almost jumping out of the old man's skin as it sought to communicate his anger to the world. Umbu rushed into the corridors, some of them with the straps still loose on their armor, some not even bothering with masks, and the unmistakable fury pouring off of the third Hokage made them hesitate. If you are loyal to the Hidden Leaf Village and its Hokage, follow me. At every junction where Umbu gathered, Sarutobi repeated this single sentence, and Konoha ninja fell in behind him. At the second turn, half the Umbu did not move. After a moment filled with tightening grips and drawn breaths, Sarutobi repeated his directive. 2 Umbu out of 25 tried to shrink back and were skewered by their fellows in robes. Then, the earth simply swallowed them all. Shimura Danzo was sleeping on the small cot wedged between his desk and the filing cabinets when he heard the sound of rushing water. He put a hand on the edge of the couch, intending to haul himself to his feet, but never got the chance. The metal door of his office turned to rust, then dissolved entirely as not 2, but 5 Konoha Umbu charged forward and pinned him to the ground, boots pressing his withered limbs into the stone. Hiruzen walked in, his hat gone, the edge of his beard singed, and the killing intent pouring off of him made the Umbu twitch ever so slightly. Shimura. Hiruzen. It was a question, but there was no surprise in it. Merely confusion. The Uchiha children, Miyake Uchiha and Takeru Uchiha, are labeled in the Konoha registry as stillbirths. The primary lineage scroll of the Uchiha clan had the same record. Shibaki Uchiha died in the Uchiha massacre 4 years ago at the hands of his cousin twice removed. It is as you say, said Danzo as the wheels in his mind began to turn. The third Hokage walked over to press the point of a naked Tonto blade against his robe, just above the heart. Is it? Before Danzo opened his mouth, the third leaned in and Danzo grunted as he felt the blade pierce his skin. Not deeply, not enough to puncture his heart or deflate his lung. But just enough to drive the point home. I have always been honest with you, Hiruzen, when you asked me questions in the past. When I asked you questions, yes. That was my failing, said the third Hokage. Too often I did not ask questions, and allowed you to operate the Umbu as you saw fit. Too often I turned a blind eye in the name of promising experiments, or the possibility of stolen secrets. If you have ever truly been my friend, Shimura, I need to know the next answer you give me will be true. I swear it upon the grave of my father, said Danzo, but Hiruzen shook his head. Not good enough, I remember your father. Danzo smiled. There was still enough here that their old countersign had not been abandoned. Hiruzen was not under a genjutsu or a transformation technique, nor was he. Honesty it was, then. Miyake Uchiha was a true stillbirth, to my knowledge. Takeru Uchiha's father was destitute and had been cast out of the clan for being a rotten, miserable bastard. He was going to sell his son, eyes and all, on the hot springs black market. I attended the auction and killed everyone in the room, save the boy, scarcely more than 5. I took him into root and told Fugaka that the boy had died in the conflict. He had seen too much to be reintegrated into the standard forces. Who made that decision? Snapped Hiruzen. Who told you the boy was no longer salvageable? I did, said Danzo, and his voice did not quaver. You know my philosophy. I may spend shinobi, but I do not waste them. His death, at such an age, would have been a waste. And a disappointment. He shook his head and tooted. All this time and the Sharingan never appeared. I suppose that is why the Uchiha never bothered executing family pets to bring it forth. The activation of such a dojutsu is most temperamental. And Shibaki Uchiha, said a new voice. Masks and cloaks parted as Yojeo staggered into the office, Pheasant offering her a shoulder to lean on. I found him in the garden with shuriken in his back. Dead. And he was, said Danzo. But the corpse disposal team had a bit of a shock when something inside that fire started moving, indeed, started to crawl back out. He paused, letting the room feel the shocked silence that greeted his words. Both of those root agents rushed him to this hospital, where we managed to save his life. The rest of him, however, was another matter. This young man would be in his 20s by now, said the Hokage. Since he did not die of his wounds. He. Swords, kunao, and shuriken sprouted like flowers from the hands of every single Umbu who was not already holding one as a giggle floated its way through the crowd. Permission granted, Shibaki, said Danzo with a grimace. Hiruzen, I do apologize for the smell. The Umbu known as Monkey stood alone, giggling, as his hands reached up and removed his mask. There were gasps, prayers, and gagging noises as the layers of genjutsu behind the mask were dispelled. His skin was not the pale skin of an Uchiha, but the pallor of something subjected to such sustained heat that it had passed by the black of charring, and into the crumbling of ash. Dark cracks ran across it, and where the skin flaked away, the muscle was taut, tightened by the heat and time. One such patch of skin lay across the right side of his face, a patch of dark red muscle that twitched whenever he laughed, while the white marble in place of an eyeball kept staring. His other eye was dark, but alive with malice as it darted around each umbu in its sights, before settling on Danzo. He was utterly bald, flensed of hair and follicle alike, and his nose was twisted by the vast grin that disordered his features. He smelled like burned meat that had rotted on the inside, and several umbu were sick all over the floor as the smell penetrated their masks. And all the time, he giggled. "Please put your mask back on, monkey," said Danzo, and the walking corpse bowed his head to slip the wide-eyed orange mask back on as the giggling subsided along with the smell. "By the sage," said Hiruzen as he turned back to his old friend with horror and pity in his eyes. "Did you never try to help him?" "We did," said Danzo with a resigned air. But the same principles applied to both mind and body. There was nothing healthy to connect, to nurture. No unburned flesh to graft new tissue onto, no shard of sanity that could be helped to prosper. Simply a man held together by his pain. A pain I directed with Shisui's eye once it became clear that not even the Koda Amatsukami could aid Shibaki. "It would have been kinder to kill him then," said Yojao, and she was surprised to see Monkey bob his head in a nod. "Go ahead," said Danzo. "He will not resist, will you, monkey?" Hiruzen snapped his fingers. Swords drove forward as earthen spears converged from the floor and ceiling, and as one, they shattered against red armor. Glowing red samurai armor, adorned with the mask of the phoenix, hovered centimeters away from Monkey's skin as it covered him from head to toe. Monkey tilted his head sideways to reveal a flaming skeleton with glowing red eyes, an eerie mirror of his own skeletal structure. He shrugged apologetically and the armor's shoulders rose with him as Danzo continued speaking. "I have several theories, of course, but they would better be explained if I had access to my files. Or a chair to sit in." "You will have neither," snapped the third Hokage. "You will sit in the dark, while I decide if the secrets you still have are worth the bother of keeping you alive." Danzo nodded, his face a portrait of resignation as the umbu dragged him out. "I did it all for you, Hiruzen. Every secret, every death, because I remember what you told me the second week you became Hokage. This village must not suffer another war," said Hiruzen. Monkey giggled as the Hokage approached him, the armor unwinding and dissolving back into his skin. "Will you attempt to resist?" Monkey shook his head. "Will you attempt to free Shimura Danzo of your own accord?" Another no. "If he explicitly orders it, or conveys this order in any way, shape, or form." A pause, then a single finger extended and pointed at Hiruzen as the umbu around them bristled. "You will obey me?" A nod. "If my orders and Shimura Danzo's orders come into conflict?" Monkey shrugged, and this time, they noticed the smallest trickle of ash float down from the illusion of healthy bare shoulders in the umbu uniform. Hiruzen sighed and suddenly looked every one of his 87 years. "Monkey, these 3 umbu will escort you to a high-value cell, where you will live in what comfort we can provide until such time as a solution for your condition can be devised, no matter what it may be. Is this amenable?" A nod. The parody of a man walked down the corridor, surrounded by 3 official umbu escorts, and a much larger contingent of hangers-on as Hiruzen turned to Yojao. "Cat." She attempted to salute and clutched her side as blood spread across her bandages again. "Lord Hokage. I would name you the new head of umbu, provided you sit down long enough to stop bleeding all over those requisition forms." A ghost of a smile passed across Yojao's face as an umbu medic hovered in the doorway and they waved him in. "I promise to be an improvement over the previous occupant, sir. Start by sending teams out. I want every one of the clan heads in my office before 7 in the morning." Cat began issuing orders at a rapid pace as masked ninjas scattered. But Hiruzen Sarutobi heard none of this as he paced the dark halls of the fortress carved by the second Hokage and wondered how it had all gone so wrong. Chapter 48, Lost and Found PT3, A Tense Breakfast. The longer someone stayed awake, the more it affected their mental state, approaching symptoms of drunkenness after the first 12-hour period of continuous operation in a high-stress environment. So Inoichi Yamanaka cast a furtive look at Indra Uchiha, who was swaying slightly on his feet and appeared to only be vertical through the sheathed sword planted like a pillar underneath his clasped hands. He was also not the only one to have come to the Hokage's office armed or disheveled. Inoichi's hair hung loose and damp behind him. Tsuminyazuka wasn't wearing a bra as she sheathed and unsheathed her claws, and Shibuya Barame's ever-present goggles had been replaced by thin spectacles that left his empty eye sockets clearly visible. Ordinarily, any one of these would have been cause for concern, certainly feed for the gossip mill, but Shikaku Nara's cold gaze silenced them all. Inoichi's old friend stood at the Hokage's right hand, and his hand tapped the pommel of the Nara clan's shadow sword, which, to Inoichi's recollection, hadn't been drawn since the end of the Third Ninja War. And amidst all this tension and muttering, someone had catered the dem meeting. A table of breakfast spreads had been laid out along the far wall, fruits, pastries, and lukewarm eggs, a convenient outlet to keep the shinobi occupied until the meeting started. Not to mention the 2 coffee pots which were already empty. Inoichi's hands moved through 3 signs and he felt his morning fatigue slip away as the mind-focusing jutsu activated. It was an addictive jutsu, but he felt he'd need it on this particular occasion. As he finished, the door to the Hokage's office swung open and Hayashi Hayaga strode in, his clan's lineage scroll hanging on his back. "Good, you're all here," said the Hokage, though he looked drawn and tired, hands clasped in front of him. "Now let's get this over with." His hands activated the crystal ball on his desk as Hiruzen Sarutobi tore his own reputation into 1,000 pieces. 42 minutes later, the shocked silence had not been broken, save by Hiruzen's voice as he described the brief, but costly battles in the Umbu headquarters. Members of Root, loyal to their own inscrutable creeds over the Leaf Village, had either disappeared into the warren of tunnels or tried to fight against the Hokage Sambu in a torrent of fratricidal bloodshed. They had dashed themselves against Hiruzen's fury and they had lost, badly. All remaining Umbu had sworn their oaths of allegiance to the Leaf Village and to its Hokage, but the force had been reduced to 68% of its full strength. Once the Hokage's grim recitation had finished, Indra explained the discovery which had sent the Hokage into such a fury. The revelation that Root's appropriation of clan children was not an isolated incident had Shivi buzzing like an hornet's nest, while Tsum's teeth had been bared at the Hokage for some time. Each clan head thought theirs was a unique case, a child with a dangerous power or aberrant personality taken under a senior shinobi's wing to either tutor them in their abilities or as a last resort when conventional support structures had failed. The rising hostility in the room was so great that the Umbu's hands twitched towards their weapons and only a sharp word from Hiruzen settled them. The old man looked miserable as clan head after clan head unfurled scrolls onto the office floor, ignoring weathered death dates and stillbirths to uncover the truth. "I'll kill him," Tsum was muttering as she stared at the 3 glowing names on her scroll, one of which was her own younger sister, now 12 years missing. "I'll rip his throat out with my teeth." "As much as I would like to see that," admitted Inoichi, "there are still many questions with no answers, locks and seals only Shimura Danzo holds the keys to, unless Sarutobi." "I taught him some of his seals," said the Hokage. "Provided you agree, I will spend as much time as possible going through his files to undo as much of the damage as possible. I freely admit, I did not suspect Shimura had fallen so far, to use our own children dash. But other villages' children? Orphans," said Indra acidly, his lone eye glowing coal-like behind his curtain of hair. "Uchiha no one would miss." "Uchiha-san oversteps his bounds," said Hisashi Hayaga with a frown. "The Cloud incident proves that the other villages are willing to use equally unscrupulous methods to acquire rare dojutsu. Ao of the Mist is testament enough, and I should not need to remind the Uchiha's bloodline heir of the furor around Kakashi Hateke's own Cherry Non." Indra bowed his head in acknowledgement of a point scored, but Hisashi wasn't done. "Nonetheless, I believe Hiruzen Sarutobi has lost the trust of the clans under his command with these revelations, which strike at the very foundation of why this village was constructed. His reinstatement in the aftermath of the Ninetales attack was a desperate measure, a temporary one we allowed through habit to become permanent." His voice became more formal, measured as he intoned words none of those present save Hiruzen had expected. "The Hayaga have come to the Hokage, by custom and law. As we are bound to the village, so is he. In the name of these ancient bonds, we seek counsel in this dark hour. The Hokage has broken our sacred bond and allowed the clan to fail. Rise, O Fire Shadow, and hear the tidings of the Hayaga. By blood we were forged and in blood we are both bound. The Hokage has failed in his duties, as a protector of the Hayaga clan, and the clan has come seeking vengeance. How shall he answer?" Indra's jaw dropped, as did most of the others, but Hisashi had eyes only for the man sitting at the oaken desk, who in that moment looked very frail indeed. He could not meet their eyes. The Fire Shadow accepts your petition, Lord Hyuga, and invites you to take counsel, as has long been the custom and right of the great clans of Konoha. I am willing to step down as Hokage and make a public apology in the hopes of allowing the Leaf Village a path to peace. Perhaps that would be best, said Shikaku Nara, whose knuckles had gone white around the hilt of the shadow sword, and only Choza Akimika's hand on his shoulder prevented him from drawing it and plunging the sunlit room into darkness. But we must ensure the village is secure before such a step can be taken. Secure, exclaimed Choza, the Chunin exams are in what, 3-4 months? A new Hokage during such a well-attended and high-security event would be a diplomatic nightmare, not to mention the personal pressure it would put on whoever dons the hat. And deciding that's an entire process itself. How long did it take for the village to decide on Minato? At least 8 months, said Hisashi, but to be fair, that was in the middle of a war and there were several other strong contenders. Shikaku folded his arms and glowered at Homura and Kotaru, the Hokage's other former teammates, who had been penned into the far wall by a group of Umbu and who had been entirely silent the entire time. Kotaru in particular looked distinctively nervous underneath her wrinkles and hairband, while Homura's expression was dominated by shock. I still think Kushina would have been the better choice. Indra perked up while the room filled with a mix of agreement, vehement refusals from the more senior ninja, and shrugs. Even 13 years dead, Kushina Uzumaki still held the hearts of Konoha's ninja. Interesting. He filed away that tidbit for later and raised his hand for attention. I am inclined to agree with Hisashi, on behalf of the Uchiha clan head. Sarutobi and his ilk have served Konoha for many years, but too many failures can be laid at their feet. They must step down, but Choza is right to delay the official move until after the Chunin exams. Can they be trusted with what power they still possess? Asked Shibuya Barame as he lifted his spectacles to knead the bridge of his nose. Homura runs the committee orchestrating the exams, not to mention number of dignitaries who still have to be invited, vetted, etc. The old man raised his hands in surrender. You'll have no trouble from me, Abarame-san. I want these exams to run as smoothly as possible. Kotaru muttered something that might have been coward, but the assorted shinobi let the comment pass. The conversation soon swiftly drifted into administrative matters as the Konoha clans efficiently carved away arm after arm of Sarutobi Hiruzen's powers over the course of the morning. When Choza Akimichi was finally satisfied the logistics had all been worked out, he gave his assent and the 4 noble clans of Konoha were in agreement. Hiruzen Sarutobi's days as Hokage were coming to a close in an ignominious end for the professor. For his own part, the man in question sat silently, absorbing it all and giving no sign of the weight that lifted from his shoulders. 3 hours earlier, Iruka Umino dragged himself from the clutches of sleep and Kakashi's death grip on his arm when he heard an insistent tapping on his window. He shook Kakashi's shoulder and the other man's eyes snapped open with startling swiftness, one glowing red in the dark. Both turned towards the window, where the moonlight was blocked by a cloaked and rather haggard-looking figure. Counting on the large t-shirt he was wearing to keep him decent, Iruka moved over and opened the window to reveal a slightly crazed-looking Indra Uchiha, whose hair was sticking up and who still crackled with residual lightning charge. Indra? What's dash? Iruka, thank Amaterasu. The other man sagged as Kakashi came closer. I went looking for you at Kakashi's apartment, but then realized he's an absolute pig and you'd never stand for it, so I tracked, you know what? Forget it. He shook his head, the red of his Sharingan leaving after images on Iruka's sleep-fogged vision. It's Naruto and Sasuke. Are they all right? Asked Iruka and Kakashi at once and with equal alarm. Physically, they were when I left, but can you guys go over and babysit? I gotta go make sure Hiruzen's heart doesn't explode, or there's a coup or anything, and my kids need someone with their head on straight to sit on them. His eyes glazed over and Iruka clearly heard him muttering to himself. Do I even want Sakura involved in this? She's their teammate and friend, but she's also a child and they've had enough trouble this week. Karen's bad enough as it is. He turned to look at his left shoulder. Yes, I'm aware you can take it, but the point is, you don't have to. He swung to his other shoulder. And don't you even start. I love you, but don't even dash. Indra, said Irika sharply in the voice that could make 36 ninja children snap to attention. Pull yourself together. His heart rate slowed slightly as Indra took a deep breath and visibly calmed down. Sorry, he gave an apologetic grin that could have been copied from Naruto's own and likely was. I'm all over the place tonight. Thank the gods Shikaku Nara's a night owl. We'll do it, said Irika as Kakashi hopped into a pair of pants behind him. Anything mission critical we need to know? Indra held up 2 fingers. Keep them within the Uchiha district, since Jiraiya sealed it, you should be safe. Second, if Sasuke starts firing black flame or Naruto goes orange, throw them in the nearest pond. Black flames? Wondered Irika, but Kakashi's heavy sigh told him he didn't want to know. Good luck, said the Kopinin simply, and Irika shielded his eyes as Indra suddenly blazed with lightning chakra, a star come to earth. Then he was gone, a line of light seared across Irika's vision as Indra moved across the village at a speed the Chunin could barely follow. Lightning armor, said Kakashi with reluctant admiration. Last time I tried that, I turned a perfectly good Chunin vest to ash and superheated 2 Konoha enough to scorch. Irika was expecting fire, screams, and shinobi in the streets of the Uchiha district, but when they arrived, all was quiet. There was a black scorch on the top of the red Torii gate from Indra's passage, but at first glance, all was well. That just creeped Irika out even more. Oddly, then, the intermittent lights and muffled noise from the clan head's house were comforting because it meant Naruto and Sasuke were still there. Irika opened the door and was greeted by the sight of Sasuke Uchiha, flat on the wood floor, glaring up at Karen and Naruto Uzumaki, who were perched on his chest. Get off of me, Uzumaki. Nuh-uh. Naruto thumped the head of Fox Fang next to Sasuke's face for emphasis. Look, I get it, I'm pissed too, and so is Karen. But Karen, what time is it? The redhead next to him, who was busy tying the Uchiha's legs together with rope, glanced up. 4:18 in the morning. Sasuke, if you go barging into someone's house, that's not the best way to start reconnecting with your family. It's actually the best way to get stabbed. Well, what about how we met you, retorted Sasuke, as Kakashi took the moment to loudly clear his throat. Well, I didn't think you kids would get up to this kind of ruckus for at least another year or 2. Recreating the plot of Ika Ika Sleepover already. Irika was tempted to kick his boyfriend in the shin, but the sheer absurdity of the comment had its intended effect, because all 3 children stopped struggling to stare at them. Hey Irika-sensei, Kakashi-sensei. How come you guys here? Indra sent us, Naruto, said Irika as he moved closer and peered closer in the light shining through from the kitchen. Sasuke's eyes were red and puffy from crying, while Naruto's voice was hoarse. He seemed, Irika searched for the right word. Erratic, so we were worried about you. Oh, we're fine, no need to worry Irika-sensei, cheered Naruto. Sasuke was gonna go all vengeance for the Uchiha, but Karen figured he can't really do that if he can't get out of the house. Which do you think would be better, if we tied him to the oak tree in the backyard, or that central post in the hallway? These ropes can't hold me, and you know it, said the Uchiha. Naruto, if you get off me right now I won't break your nose. Yeesh, what got into him? Said Kakashi with exaggerated curiosity. Karen shrugged and tied off Sasuke's legs in a neat bow of rope. We found out that the Leaf Village's Umbu are just as shitty as the Grass Village, big surprise, and they were hiding a bunch of living Uchiha from everybody. Or somebody sure was. How did you began Irika, as Karen stood up to examine her handiwork with satisfaction. Indra-san brought back a bunch of old scrolls and did a bunch of weird jutsu with his blood. They're in the kitchen. Naruto, you got this. Oh yeah. Naruto patted Sasuke on the shoulder and barely reacted when his friend head-butted him, sending blood streaming out of Naruto's nose. Seriously, Sasuke. Let me go. Screamed the Uchiha, thrashing underneath his friend like a limp fish. The Uchiha deserve to know who they are, and I've got to be the one to tell them. Do they? Asked Karen as Kakashi drifted past her into the kitchen. I mean, ever since my mom told me who the Uzumaki were and why we had to stay hidden, that fear of Hunter Ninja and Umbu's been pretty constant. Maybe they're better off. Karen, interrupted Irika with a stern look, watch your words. She glared right back. Whatever. I don't even know who you are. Oh, sorry. Iruka's face softened as he knelt down and offered his hand to the small girl. I'm Iruka Umino. I used to teach Naruto and Sasuke at the Ninja Academy before Indra Uchiha brought them on as his team. Karen took his hand warily and shook it once. Okay then. Listen, can you keep an eye on those guys? I want to go get my mom's scroll and see if she had any paralysis seals we can stick on Sasuke. At Iruka's assent, she left the room and the galumphing of feet on stairs announced her retreat as Iruka sat down. So, Naruto, Sasuke, we haven't really had a chance to catch up recently. Since neither of you are going anywhere before sunrise, at least, mind telling me a little bit more about what you've been up to? Mostly finding out that everyone in my clan has secrets, grumbled Sasuke as Naruto dug his heel into Sasuke's gut. Ah, Sasuke, that's unfair. Even Indra-sensei didn't know for sure about a lot of this stuff, he just had his suspicions, and he glanced at Iruka and shrugged. The Kyuubi loves messing with us, so he's not really a reliable source of information, right? You've talked to the Kyuubi no Kitsune! Exclaimed Iruka in alarm. Whatever he told you is either a lie, or a half-truth trying to get you to free him again. He thought about calling for Kakashi, but Naruto was barreling on. We know that, Iruka-sensei, we're not stupid. I'm not stupid, emphasized Sasuke. You're Team 7's resident idiot. It took a surprising amount of Iruka's willpower to not point out that Sasuke was the one tied upon the floor as Naruto grinned at his friend, showing more than a few teeth. Sorry, what was that? I can gag you, or Karen, and I can just slap that paralysis seal on and go back to bed. That does sound tempting, admitted Iruka, who saw where Naruto was going with this. We can even just leave him on this hard, uncomfortable floor, that's all the punishment he needs. Sasuke unleashed an impressive Sharingan-enhanced Uchiha glower, but it held less of the venom that his earlier outbursts had contained. He stayed silent as Karen returned to the hallway with a weathered scroll in her hands, letting it unfurl across the floor. Let's see, LMN, oh, P for paralysis. One finger moved across columns of characters in what seemed like devilishly complicated seals to even Iruka's experienced eye. His minor clan specialized in helping maintain Konoha's barrier core, but even these were. Iruka's train of thought crashed spectacularly as the sound of breaking glass came from the kitchen. He body flickered into the doorway just in time to see the second glass fall off the tabletop to shatter on the floor. Kakashi's hands were clenched around the edge of the shuddering table in a white-knuckle grip. The wood had splintered under the force of his clenched fingers as he stared blankly at the weathered surface of the secondary lineage scroll. Iruka followed his gaze and saw the problem at once. Obito Uchiha. He'd heard that name before, recited at memorial services for the fallen of the Third Great Shinobi War and sometimes wrenched from Kakashi's sleeping lips as he catapulted up from the depths of some nightmare, with his hand outstretched. He and Kakashi had both thought Obito Uchiha was dead. The glowing characters on the lineage scroll, apparently, thought otherwise. Iruka didn't have to use Kakashi's vaunted genius to connect the dots. Obito's alive. Kakashi let out a moan and Iruka swooped in to catch the man as he nearly collapsed. Where is he? Whispered Kakashi, the devastation clear on his face alongside the hope. Why hasn't he come home? Shhhh, soothed Iruka as his hands rubbed circles into Kakashi's shoulder muscles, which were as taut as tripwires and just as likely to snap. It's still too early to know anything for sure. Focus, Kakashi. He dug his thumbs into a knot of muscle to get his boyfriend's attention. Indra-san sent us to take care of Naruto and Sasuke, remember? I'm sure when he comes back, he'll have more information for us. The acknowledgement he got was less a nod, and more a twitch of the gray-haired man's head, but Iruka dragged Kakashi's unresisting form back out into the hallway, then onto the living room couch, where Naruto and Karen had layered Sasuke in scraps of sealing paper and were already doodling out the beginnings of several dozen paralysis seals, consulting the instructions on Karen's scroll intermittently. Spotting an incipient disaster, Iruka hurried over and began stripping slips off of Sasuke's neck and forehead. Neither of you have done much sealing, have you? He remarked as the two Uzumaki shook their heads. Well, if you're sealing a human target and want to keep them alive, it's usually a good idea to not freeze their face or neck, since you might accidentally paralyze something important, like his esophagus, or nose. He slapped the extra seals on Kakashi, who'd been counting travel time on his fingers and was doubtless 3 hours away from becoming a rogue ninja just to search for Obito. Trying to ignore how much that thought stung, Iruka produced a small ink pot and brush from his Chunin flak jacket and leaned over to examine the sealing scroll. Now, why don't we all learn this seal together? 2 hours later, Sasuke had screamed into a pillow twice, set himself on fire in a jutsu-based escape attempt, and finally fallen asleep. Oddly enough, within seconds of his friend's eyes finally closing, Naruto had punched himself so hard he'd knocked himself out, causing yet another nosebleed. Karen had informed the alarmed Iruka that this was apparently a relatively normal occurrence for the Uchiha Uzumaki household, alluding to bad dreams she refused to elaborate further on. Still, Iruka and Kakashi were able to pull some of the details of Team 7's escape from the grass village out of her, and Iruka was grateful the topic had at least distracted Kakashi from the mental breakdown he could almost see the veteran Jonin shoving into a small black box in the back of his mind. At the moment, he'd left Naruto, Sasuke, and Kakashi in the living room while he and Karen bustled around the kitchen in pursuit of something resembling breakfast. Iruka's ninja training absently noted that she moved through the space with easy familiarity, already well accustomed to the space despite the week or two she'd been in the Leaf Village. So, he ventured as his brown hands sorted through boxes of tea in search of coffee. You obviously don't like the umbu, but what about the rest of the Leaf Village? Karen shrugged as she plugged in the toaster. It's alright. Naruto already gave me the grand tour and everything. The faces are creepy though. The faces, echoed Iruka as his memory pulled up an image of grocery shopping the day before. People from the Leaf Village aren't especially sinister, in my experience. At least, he amended, not more than any other village. Quite a bit less, actually. I mean those big stone faces on the mountain, said Karen as she stuck her tongue out. It feels like they're watching me. Iruka let out a genuine laugh. Well, I suppose I see how they can be disconcerting to a newcomer. But the intent is that they are protective, the legacies of the previous Hokage, watching over the village and helping to guide it into the future. It doesn't seem like Lord Hokage's doing a very good job then, decided Karen as her toast ticked away. But you've lived here longer, and you're a teacher, right? Iruka nodded as he held back his instinctive defense of Hiruzen Sarutobi. If I learn ninja skills, like water walking and tree climbing, and sealing jutsu, do I still have to be a ninja? She looked at him as anxiety spread across her face in the early morning light. Because some of that stuff sounds really useful, but I don't think I want to be a Konoha shinobi. The Chunin instructor closed the cabinet in defeat and settled on hot water instead. No one will force you to be a shinobi, he said firmly. No matter what, Karen Uzumaki, you have my word you can learn whichever skills you want. Provided, he added with an upraised finger, you use these skills to do honest work, not become a criminal or anything. Karen rolled her eyes. Please, who do you think I am? Naruto's cousin, said Iruka with a chuckle as he sipped at his cup, feeling the warmth spread through his body in conjunction with fond memories. Let me tell you about some of the things Naruto got up to while he was in the academy. He had just finished the story about when Naruto had painted the stone faces with neon paint when Karen's head swung around and she stared at the wall. Sakura's at the gate, called Kakashi from the living room as Iruka's eyebrows rose. Can you sense her from that far away, Karen? That's very impressive. The Uzumaki girl blushed nearly as red as her hair as she slathered her toast with peanut butter. I'll go let her in, she said, not meeting Iruka's eyes. Let her know what her teammates have been up to while she's the only one who got a good night's sleep. She was out the door before Iruka could reply, so he took the other 3 slices of peanut butter toast and doled them out to Kakashi and the boys. Are you going to free me now, Iruka? Asked his boyfriend. That depends, said the Chunin. Are you going to go running off out the front gates? Kakashi sighed. I want to, he admitted. But Indra wanted us to keep an eye on these two, so that's what we're going to do. I'm right here, you know, said Naruto as a bound Sasuke sullenly ate his toast using only his mouth. Karen was perhaps 80% of the way to the front gate of the Uchiha district when she realized she was still in her pajamas. Must be more tired than I thought, she admitted, as she saw the bulky, bandaged form of Dosu leaning against the red torii gate that marked the boundary of the Uchiha district. She caught Sakura's annoyed tone as the Uzumaki got within earshot. Listen, Doso, thanks for the offer, but Indra-sensei's note was very insistent. I'm joining my team for breakfast instead. Girl, you need to live a little, it's just breakfast. Maybe some other time, said Sakura, and Karen felt a wave of relief pass through the other girl as she waved. Oh, here we go, Karen, let me in. Doso moved off, grumbling something Karen was grateful she couldn't pick out as she pressed her hand to the Torii gate and Sakura passed through in a pulse of chakra only Karen could feel. Her aura, normally bubblegum pink and edged in silver, was slightly clouded by something gray, so the Uzumaki girl frowned at Doso's retreating back. What was that all about? Sakura's poker face was excellent, but Karen could feel her discomfort. I dunno. She was silent for a while as the two girls walked back in the direction of the Uchiha clan head's house, and Karen thought the topic was finished until Sakura spoke again. He wanted me to join him for breakfast, like, as a date. Karen handed Sakura her peanut butter toast and the girl devoured it in 3 bites. So, would you have gone? Sakura's expression flickered through consternation and curiosity, before settling on confusion. Gods, I have no idea. The few times I've met him, Doso's been okay, I guess, but I heard he's not the nicest person to his teammates. Then why even do the one date? Remember Indra-sensei wanted us to all try dating people? He actually wrote it up as a D-rank mission and everything. She blushed and shoved her hands behind her back as they clasped together. He can be so embarrassing sometimes. Boys are weird, admitted Karen, and Sakura laughed, clear as crystal in the early morning air. They turned off the main thoroughfare and onto one of the side streets as Sakura slowed down and trailed off to the side, causing Karen to look over her shoulder at her. What? They are. I'm not arguing that, said Sakura as her gaze sought out the corners and empty spaces of the street. Her hands flashed through 4 signs as a muffling sensation settled over the two girls. Karen, she said, her voice lowering to a tone that could only be described as conspiratorial, can you keep a secret? Karen thought back to seals around their little hut, her mother's voice full of pride and fear. Never repeat what I am about to tell you, little seashell. To whispers in the dark. Yeah, she said, putting out her chest a little with pride, I can keep a secret. Sakura took a deep breath and planted her feet. I think I like girls. Karen nodded. Yeah, we just got done talking about how weird boys in general are. Sakura grimaced. No, I mean, you are sexually attracted to the female form, piped up inner Sakura, trying to be helpful. That blue-haired woman with Indra rocked our god's damned world. You realized Sasuke Uchiha, for all his qualities, lacks key feminine attributes. You want titties in your hands, warm and soft. You. I think girls are hot, blurted Sakura in a desperate attempt to stem the increasing filth coming from her inner self and hating how her face had turned the color of the stop sign they'd just passed. She watched with bated breath as Karen's face moved from surprise to amusement, then into relief. Okay, cool. The redhead chuckled and tucked a rebellious strand of hair back behind her ear. You know, I was worried you were going to say something super heavy. But it is, protested Sakura as all the tension in her body suddenly began to flow away. Shouldn't this be a big thing? Karen shrugged. You're asking the wrong girl. I'm still just glad you're my friend, and thanks for telling me. It means a whole lot. She gave Sakura a hesitant smile. Would it be weird if I hug you, like as congratulations? This seems like the kind of thing people would do that for. Sakura felt a smile break across her face as she opened her arms and felt the Uzumaki girl fling herself into their embrace. In that perfect, soaring moment, Sakura Harino felt as if she could fly. Since she could have let her friend float on that feeling the rest of the day, complete with big endearing smile, Karen felt bad that the news she had to deliver about the Uchiha Uzumaki household was so unpleasant. Still, she was impressed and slightly unsettled to see Sakura shift from blissfully cheery to analytical, well, ninja. They were in sight of the Uchiha clan head's household when Sakura finished running down the political power and disposition of Konoha's major clans, ticking off which ones would be likely to help the Uchiha clan, and which would be subtly trying to hinder them. How the Uzumaki fit into that structure, neither of them were quite sure. Suzuki's anger hadn't surprised her, and Karen felt her own ire rise once more as she was reminded of the blazing golden words on the lineage scroll. Stillborn. A filthy, disgusting lie, one far removed from the people she had come to know as Konoha's Team 7. So I'm guessing Suzuki wants vengeance, right? Or to meet these mysterious Uchiha? Asked Sakura. Her counterpart opened the front door to hear raised voices. Take a wild guess. And I'm telling you, Suzuki, that we need to stay calm as we deal with this, said Kakashi's voice, striving for calm. Calm? Calm? My clan was slaughtered, and now we find out that not only did some of them survive, but Konoha didn't bother to tell me. How do you expect me to be calm? Sakura whistled softly and grimaced. Okay. She smoothed out the hem of her haori and compulsively retied her ponytail, the hair tie wrapping tight around the bundle of hair with a decisive snap. Here goes. She strode into the Uchiha's living room like she owned it, with Karen next to her as Suzuki snorted like a troublesome bull at a stage show. Oh Sakura, perfect timing. Can you help get these off of me? She crossed her arms. Depends, what are you gonna do when I let you out? I'm going to put on the clan's armor, find an executioner's sword in the armory, and march to the Hokage to demand the head of whoever covered this up. Because that will solve everything, said Sakura with biting sarcasm. What if Indra-sensei's already done that? And where is he anyway? Iruka cleared his throat. Indra knocked on my window at nearly 4 in the morning and asked us to watch your teammates, and to say he was frantic is an understatement. He hesitated, but decided honesty was the best policy here. Your master also appeared concerned about some kind of coup, though if he was going to prevent it or cause it, I'm not quite sure. He'd gone to Shikaku Nara before us, though. You think that could really happen? Asked Naruto as Iruka let the silence speak for itself. Nothing's on fire yet, quipped Kakashi, and Iruka admitted that was as good a metric as any. Point being, said Sakura as she flopped down onto the couch next to Suzuki, it sounds like your uncle is already up to his elbows in this himself. Well, elbow, singular. That got a chuckle out of almost everyone, even if it was somewhat forced. He's the Uchiha bloodline guardian, said Suzuki, not the clan head. His words won't carry the same weight as mine will. Oh, I highly doubt that, said Kakashi. When the other clan heads learn about this, if they haven't already, they will back the Uchiha's decision, whatever it is, to the hilt if I had to guess. He tapped his forehead protector, which covered his gifted Sharingan. Clan members hidden away by their own village? That strikes at the very core of why they chose to live in Konoha in the first place. Not to mention, they'll be concerned for their own children. Sakura nodded in agreement. The Hyuga incident might also play a factor, so that's 2 of the 4 great clans with serious issues. She saw Iruka and Kakashi giving her surprised looks. What, it's in a recent history of Konoha. Suzuki. Naruto leaned down and took his friend's hand, peeling away the paralysis seal to wrap his hand around Suzuki's as he stared the Uchiha in the eye. You gotta understand, we're with you on this, all the way to the end. We made a blood oath, remember? The children ignored the gasp and shriek of horror from Kakashi and Iruka respectively. I'm not saying you don't deserve vengeance, cause we'll do that together too. Let us help figure this out together, like we did the first time. He gave a weak chuckle. When you came falling out of the rain and into my shitty old apartment. Sure, I kicked your ass, but then we both got up and went to find Jiji, and we got some serious answers. Now we've got Sakura, Karen, Indra-sensei, Iruka-sensei, Kakashi-sensei, and probably all sorts of other people too. Suzuki swallowed heavily and stared into Naruto's eyes for several seconds of absolute silence. Thanks Naruto, he said with something that wasn't a sniffle. That means a lot. He leaned forward as Naruto's hands came up and engulfed Suzuki in a hug. Anytime, buddy. They watched as even through all the paralysis seals, the tension seemed to flow out of Suzuki's body and into Naruto's, where it was swallowed by a bottomless well of energy and fierce compassion. Sakura found herself thinking of her own embrace of Karen on the street and found her eyes welling up. The Uzumaki really are great, huh? Said inner Sakura. Those mistnin are messed up if they think these kind of people are bad. Can someone let me out now? Came a quiet voice from Naruto's shoulder. I'd like to hug my friends. 20 minutes later, after the close embrace had made Sasuke realize neither of them had in fact showered today, the party stood huddled around the kitchen table as Sasuke let a drop of blood fall onto the Uchiha fan once more. Lineage scroll, said Sasuke in an authoritative voice, grant me the same sight to locate those Uchiha who still live. They must be found and brought home. Activating bloodline location jutsu, based on previous parameters, said the scroll, before it flashed with blinding light. Once they had all finished blinking spots out of their eyes, they noticed in the dark that Sasuke's pupils had swollen to twice their original size, the tomo of the Sharingan barely visible in the ring of red. He strode out into the road and moved back towards the main thoroughfare as his teammates chatted about the best possible greeting, if there was any polite way to say, "So you're a long-lost member of my clan," and if they should buy flowers. As they did so, Iruka drifted back and ran his hand across the stubble which had gathered on his chin. "So, you're the ex-Umbu, any thoughts?" Said Kakashi. "Several, but until we know what the situation is with the Hokage, I think it's best if I keep my mouth shut." They both looked in the direction of the Hokage tower, which, thankfully, was not on fire yet. "You're the one who was appointed Lord Hokage's personal assistant, do you think he knew about this?" "Sage, no," breathed Iruka. "I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it all now, truth be told." But, the thought, now that it had entered his brain, would not leave. What would happen if he did? Kakashi thought about Indra Uchiha, the quiet man who laughed on occasion, and who carried a deep, powerful love within his heart. What that love might become, if kindled by anger. "I think," he said carefully, "we should make sure those kids stay safe." Iruka was a smart man, and a canny shinobi, so he took half a block to unpack all the implications of that statement, some of which leaned into treason if Kakashi had spoken them aloud. "Good thing we're both teachers, then." "You are," leered Kakashi. "I'm just the teacher's pet." "Please, there are children here." The first house they came to was one of the newer homes, in a neoclassical style that aped the older buildings in the Uchiha district, striving for the same outward look, but without the weight of ivy-covered walls and ancient trees. They huddled and debated slightly, but Sasuke was adamant that he would be the one to do this. However, only after he'd knocked on the door did he realize that none of them had come up with an adequate excuse why the Uchiha clan heir, 2 Uzumaki, their teammate, and 2 random ninja would be knocking on someone's door at 7 in the morning. The door opened to reveal a middle-aged woman wiping her hands on a tea towel, which disappeared when she saw the serious-looking ninja clustered around her door. "Oh, good morning Sasuke." She bowed slightly. "Or should I call you Lord Uchiha?" They'd managed to convince Sasuke to not wear the clan's lacquer red armor, but he had his sword in his belt, and Naruto had Fox Fang's hilt protruding from his shoulder. Karin had been given the honor of carrying the Uchiha clan scrolls, while Sakura was carrying a ceremonial fan. In the scroll, its function had been to wave a gust of embers over a newly born Uchiha, baptizing them in the fire that was their birthright. Karin had thought dipping babies in the ocean was a much more sensible proposition, but then Naruto had brought up sharks. Sasuke bowed back, and realized he had no idea what facial expression he should be making. "Good morning, Hakata-san," hissed Iruka as he consulted a map of the Uchiha district. "Hakata-san," continued the Uchiha. "My friends and I were going back through our old records and realized a purification ritual needs to be performed on the premises of several houses in the district, to ensure they are free of," he paused meaningfully, "unpleasant spirits. I realized that as the head of the Uchiha clan, I haven't kept up with everyone who is living here, so we thought this would be a social visit as well." Mrs. Hakata smiled and opened the door further. "Oh, well, what a nice surprise. Should I put on some coffee, or perhaps tea? My Rainjiku just finished boiling a pot of jasmine." Sasuke demurred, but Iruka beat him to the punch. "Coffee would be a lifesaver, ma'am." She bustled into the kitchen while Sasuke glanced around. The red smoke trail led in that same direction, so he asked for Naruto and Sakura to perform the cleansing ritual, while he, Karin, and the 2 adults followed her in. The smoke terminated in a girl perhaps several years older than Sasuke, who was blowing on a cup of tea. Her skin was the warm bronze relatively common to Konoha's sun-kissed population, but her hair was the same feathery brown Sasuke remembered his father and several other members of his clan had, while her dark eyes looked up with interest at the ninja's entrance. "Rangiku, this is Sasuke Uchiha," said her mother as Mrs. Hakata busied herself with the rumbling machine. "He's come to pay us a social visit, isn't that nice?" "It's nice to meet you," she echoed as Sasuke stuck out his hand and forced himself to stop staring at the point where the red smoke terminated, just above the edge of a turquoise dress. She shook his hand and returned to her tea. "Nice to meet you, Rangiku Hakata. I apologize for disturbing your morning, but we wanted to get this cleansing ritual done with and get to know some of my tenants." Kakashi gave him a subtle thumbs up as he settled into a corner and Sasuke sat down at the table, moving his sword out of the way and trying with little success to look as casual as possible. "So, what's this cleaning thing you're doing?" asked Rangiku as she opened the paper to the crossword puzzle and picked up a pencil. "We don't have bugs or anything, right?" Sasuke shook his head. "No, this is more of a spiritual cleansing." He didn't need to fake the slightly regretful grimace on his face as a mild pall settled over the room. "I'm not much of a believer, but my uncle most certainly is." Mrs. Hakata slid a cup towards him as she chattered about how thoughtful Indra Uchiha was, and what a fine idea it had been to allow families and orphaned children to join the Uchiha district. Sasuke sipped at the coffee to be polite, while Iruka seemed to inhale it. He waited, listening to the flow of the conversation as Iruka and Karen made small talk, both carefully guiding the conversation in a certain direction. "Nah," said Rangiku as she filled in 27 down, "truffles, I'm adopted." She shrugged. "Mom takes good care of me, and I've been helping her run the shop for a few years." "Would you ever want to find your birth parents?" asked Sasuke with what he hoped sounded like mild curiosity. The raised eyebrows Rangiku gave him confirmed Sasuke's lack of subtlety. "I dunno," she said. "Why, you know something." "As part of the cleansing ritual," lied Sasuke, "we had to bring the clan's lineage scroll here as well, and dash. It's been glowing a bunch," said Karen, punching straight through to the point as she placed the massive scroll on the table with a heave. "Watch your drinks." She unfurled the scroll, where, sure enough, the names were still glowing gold. Mrs. Hakata's mouth dropped open while Rangiku's expression turned brittle. "You don't seriously think I'm an Uchiha?" She laughed, but there was a sharp pain buried among the mirth. "Honestly, I don't know if this is desperate or pathetic." "Rangiku," scolded her mother. She turned to Kakashi and Iruka, wringing her hands. "I'm terribly sorry about this, but there must be some mistake here." Ma," Kakashi held up his coffee cup along with his other empty hand. "It's all up to you, honestly. Sasuke-san just thought it was a good idea to give you the option to dash." "Well, he's clearly run out of good ideas then," said Rangiku as she slammed her cup down to emphasize the point. A splash of tea hit the scroll and muddled one of the elaborate leaf patterns along the edge as Sasuke scowled. "Because this one sucks." "What, you think this is funny?" "I'm not laughing," said Sasuke shortly, and he wasn't. In fact, he could feel a similar kind of brittleness beginning to spread in his chest, but he staved off its advance with the flicker of anger that was also rising in tandem. "Look, all we're asking is for a few drops of your blood on that fan symbol," he indicated the central fan. "The scroll will do the rest." Rangiku stormed across the kitchen and yanked a very large carving knife from the knife block on the counter as Kakashi twitched. "Careful," murmured Iruka. "And when this stupid scroll of yours shows nothing?" "It's quite possible it will," said Karen, anxiously peering over from the bulk of the scroll. The older clans were very large, and they could spread very far, genetically speaking. The others stared at her and Karen squirmed. "Something my mom used to say, anyway." "Fine," growled Rangiku, and pricked her finger with the tip of the knife. The kitchen fell silent as the soft plap of blood hit the secondary lineage scroll of the Uchiha. It was silently absorbed into the scroll, then Sasuke spoke up. "Scroll, does this blood correspond with any of the living Uchiha you have outlined?" A line of red raced up and away from the fan symbol, sinking into the golden characters for Miyake Uchiha B, 49 Mi, D, 49 Mi. Stillborn. As they watched, the letters turned blood red, then darkened to black ink, staining their permanence into the artifact. "Oh my," said Mrs. Hakata, both hands covering her mouth. "Oh my, oh my. It's nice to meet you, Miyake Uchiha," said Sasuke as he looked up to see the silver of the butcher's knife filling his vision. None of them saw Kakashi move. Still, his hand snapped closed around Rangiku Hakuda's arm, wrenching it sideways to send the knife spinning to the floor, where it landed with a clatter. "Bad idea, kid," he said, and his voice was a mix of pity and gentle rebuke despite the combat glare of his single visible eye. "Oh, Miyake," wailed Mrs. Hakuda as she pulled her daughter away, "what are you doing?" "Get out," screamed the older girl, eyes dark and wild as she thrashed in her mother's grip, tears streaming down her face. "Get the fuck out of my house." Sasuke had no idea what to say as Sakura and Naruto rushed in behind him, reassuring presences at his back. "I thought this was going to be a good thing." Sakura squeezed his shoulder. "I think we don't get to decide that." "Didn't you want to know?" asked Karin as she rolled up the scroll, which was making an angry face at the Hakudas. "Didn't you ever wonder where you came from?" "Every night," sobbed Miyake, "for years." She bared her teeth. "And then you came along, butting in where you're not wanted. No, listen when I tell you to get out." Karin backed out of the kitchen door, and the other children followed in short succession. Iruka lingered, searching for something to say and coming up short as he placed his empty cup on the table. "Thank you for the coffee," he said, feeling the uselessness of the words as they left his mouth. It was delicious. The two women, who were embracing and crying in equal measure on the floor of their kitchen, did not hear him. "Well," managed Naruto after 2 blocks of silence. "That sucked." Sakura kicked him in the shin, and Naruto made a "what the hell else am I supposed to say" look at her. His teammate sighed and swapped her fan for Karin's secondary lineage scroll as the other Uzumaki pulled out in front of the miniature procession. "It could have gone better," admitted Kakashi, "but we at least should keep going, find out where or who this other smoke trail leads, if nothing else." In the silence, he wilted slightly, but kept going. "We don't have to say anything right now. We just look," said Karin as she fanned herself and sent a sea salt breeze floating back over her shoulders to wash over Team 7. Oddly enough, the smell was comforting to Sasuke, and he felt the maelstrom inside his soul ease enough for him to nod as his eyes flashed red once more and the smoke billowed into existence. "We just look," he echoed. Iruka patted his former students on the head and silently vowed to spike his next coffee. "Do you understand why that girl was upset?" he asked, and Sasuke remained silent for several seconds. "Because she had her understanding of the world and her place in it before tea, and after tea, we'd shattered it into tiny shards," said the Uchiha, slapping his forehead. "Gods, I'm such a fucking disaster." "Nah," said Naruto, pulling a funny face. "I'm Team 7's idiot, right? You said so. Besides, you wanted to see if she was family, it's no wonder you kinda pushed a bit." "That doesn't mean we should that again, Naruto," warned Kakashi. "I might not be able to catch the next knife, and Sasuke needs his face intact." "I'm just saying, it's understandable, you know," protested Naruto. "You guys remember how eager I was to meet Karin, right?" His cousin looked back and grinned at him. "Excited?" "He was bouncing off the walls," admitted Sasuke. "So," prompted Iruka, as if this was just another classroom theoretical, to be applied as a practical, "what will your next approach be, if you want better results?" "I'll take it in stages," decided Sasuke as Sakura shook her head. "No, we'll take it in stages. You're not getting rid of us that easily, Sasuke." The others nodded as Iruka and Kakashi shared a look of quiet pride. Indra was going to be proud too. Sure, said the Uchiha, waving off her objection with an air of fond resignation. "So we'll figure out who it is today, maybe just catch up with whoever it is, ask about their life, and say we're doing some cleansing ritual. Then, a few weeks later, come back with the scroll and tell them there's something weird. Show them the golden names and let them decide what to do. What if they decide they don't want to know? Then that's okay." Sasuke knew it wasn't going to be okay, but he was used to living with a certain amount of heartache. Since Indra's arrival, that heartache had lessened considerably, but Sasuke knew he could bear more. He'd be fine. "That's very mature of you," approved Iruka. "Just as long as you make sure you're being honest with yourself." The Uchiha grunted as they left the main thoroughfare and moved towards a small park. It was crowded with children playing on the equipment, and a contingent of teenagers training with Hidango Boom, Hokage says, and, for some reason, Twister. One little girl, barely 5 years old, flew straight up into the sky, shrieking with joy as she rose 5 or 6 feet into the air, before falling into the steady, mottled brown hands of Yugo. Again, she cheered as Yugo set her down on the ground and was immediately mobbed by other clamoring children. This was supposed to be training, he muttered with a nervous glance at his own hands. I don't want to hurt any of you. No worries, beamed Shin as the sea of younger children parted before him. Sai and I can catch them if they fall too far afield. Maybe you can practice drawing those cranes, Sai. His younger brother stepped forward, a small smile on his face as a paintbrush danced across a scroll. Seconds later, a flock of ink-black cranes rose from the scroll and flapped up into a circle above the group. Try and have the children pass through the circle coming up and going down, he said. If you are still worried, my cranes can catch them as well. Is this satisfactory, Yugo? The orange-haired man mumbled something that was evidently assent, for all the children cheered. However, Sasuke wouldn't have noticed if they'd all been howling for blood, because his eyes were fixed on the red smoke that ended on top of Sai's chest. Chapter 49, Lost and Found PT4, Questions of Identity. Sai had never been a formal root agent, and his training had been halted early enough that he and Shin were able to have something resembling a normal childhood. However, one thing he had learned was to feel when people were watching him. He turned around after drawing another dozen birds for Yugo to throw the now ink-spattered children into as they cheered. Dark hair, red eyes, and pale skin stared back at him. Ah yes, the Uchiha survivor and heir, Sasuke Uchiha. Sai pasted his face into a smile just like Captain Yamato had shown him, and waved at Sasuke with his paintbrush. Good morning, Sasuke. I hope our training isn't causing too much of a ruckus. I'd heard you aren't a morning person. Harano-san, Uzumaki-sans, Kakashi take. He bowed slightly to each before frowning at Iruka. I don't know who you are. Ah, that's right, chattered Iruka as he discreetly tried to jab Sasuke with his sandal. You were part of the cohort of new inductees who were sent to Chuchi's classroom to accommodate the overflow. I'm Iruka Umino, one of the academy teachers. It's a pleasure. He offered his hand, only for Sai's head to smack into it as he bowed again. Good morning to you as well. Is there something you want? Sai had directed this last remark at Sasuke, who was staring at his face with an expression that looked like the shell shock Sai had seen root agents wear when their masks came off after a particularly hard mission. You, stammered the Uchiha heir, who was now sweating. Behind him, Naruto and Kakashi attempted, and failed, to stifle their laughter as Sasuke turned crimson. I meant, there's this purification ceremony we're trying to do, he trailed off and Sai blinked slowly as he saw Sasuke's Sharingan were not only active, but his pupils had swelled to encompass most of his eyes, leaving only the thinnest red outline for his irises. As it usually did, his root training was coming in handy. I see, the pale-skinned boy said. I suspect you are high on narcotics, Sasuke Uchiha. I am surprised your companions have not given you medical aid for this matter. He raised his voice to call over the whooping of children and Yugo's grunts of effort as he threw them up and caught them on the way down. Shin, could you join me for a moment? His brother strolled over and with one look at Sasuke's face as he tried to stammer denials, came to the same conclusion as Sai. I see. He frowned up at the two senior ninja behind Sasuke. I am disappointed ninja of your stature and Heitake's reputation are allowing the Uchiha heir to wander the village in such a state. We should dash. I'm not on drugs, burst out Sasuke as Sakura jabbed Naruto with the hilt of an Uchiha fan to get him to stop laughing. There's this purification ritual we're trying to perform around the village, and apparently there's evil spirits around you. Just roll with it, stage whispered Iruka, but he was smiling slightly too. Very well, said Sai and Shin simultaneously as they straightened into parade ground rest positions. What manner of purification is necessary, Sasuke Uchiha? For a moment, the boy looked torn, but reached back and dragged the two girls forward. Karen partially unrolled the scroll and together she, Sakura, and Sasuke engaged in a round of furious whispering that Sai politely refrained from eavesdropping on. That had been Captain Yamato's second major admonition to the young ex-root agents, since apparently conventional ninja did not incessantly spy within the village to know everyone else's blackest secrets. Just the ones they let spill over drinks. Before he'd stopped them, the brothers had learned Anko Mitarashi was still a virgin, Asuma Sarutobi was dating Kurane Yui, and Tanko Inyazuka liked to wear frilly lace underneath his chinin jacket on guard duty. Finally the whispered conversation ended and Sasuke approached again as the girls tried to pretend they weren't anxiously hovering. "So, there is definitely something going on," he said as he stared at Sai's chest. "But I think I'm going to speak with my uncle about this before we do anything. Is it alright if I call on you again at some point?" "I would be delighted to have visitors," said Sai in a monotone, still with his most reassuring smile. "But we have been ordered to go to bed at 9 tonight, so please keep our available operational hours in mind." Sasuke's own smile was one of relief and he let out a breath he'd apparently been holding for several seconds longer than normal. "Great. That's great. So I'll see you then." Sai bowed again and turned to go as Shin frowned over his shoulder. "Very well, Sasuke Uchiha. Please make yourself presentable when you call upon us. Your current state would give our foster parents the wrong idea of the company we keep and I would not have Yugo-san's good name besmirched." Was all Sasuke managed as the two pale children returned to the crowd around an increasingly sweaty Yugo and Sai offered for any untossed children to ride on one of his ink tigers instead. At this there was much cheering as several were doubtful of the safety of tigers and viewed the danger as another attraction to Sai's exercise. Soon enough, the Uchiha air had passed from Sai's mind entirely, though his brother did silently resolve to steal Sasuke's supply at the first opportunity. Beetle-san had once warned them about the mushrooms within the Forest of Death, and it would not do for a clan heir to have mycelium sprout from his nose. It would be impossible to take him seriously. "I think that went much better," gasped Naruto as he slung an arm around Sasuke's shoulder. His friend tried to shrug him off, but Naruto was laughing so hard he could barely stand and clung to Sasuke like a limpet. Instead of helping him tear the first and most troublesome Uzumaki away from him, however, the rest of the party had burst into laughter as soon as they were out of earshot. "Talk about opposite reactions," said Sakura. "The first one tries to kill you, and now the Uchiha district's resident stoic thinks you're on drugs. So we're grading on a curve, then," joked Iruka to a chorus of groans. "He does this every chance he can," said Kakashi to Karen, who nodded in understanding. "If Naruto makes one more ramen-based pun, I told him I'd use my mom's scroll to turn all his shirts neon green." "Not an idle threat." Ma, that is a heavy punishment," said Kakashi as the group staggered their way back out of the park. "I just makes Iruka do the dishes for a week." "Speaking of it, what other sorts of seals are in your mother's scroll, though?" Karen shrugged as she adjusted her glasses. "Nothing super cool or anything. It's just a bunch of everyday seals people used to use for housework and stuff, I think. My mom used to use that seal whenever we got fish, because it made 'em stay fresh longer." "Hey, I know a seal like that," said Naruto, his eyes shining with excitement. "Teiwa showed me this cool preservation jutsu when we were on our way to the grass village. She used it to preserve a deer hide so she didn't have to tan it out and stuff. Maybe we can compare 'em when we get home and see if they're the same. We're done for the morning, right Sasuke?" "It's not like I'm leading a mission," said the Uchiha. "You don't have to ask my permission for anything. Do I really look that much like my uncle? If you lost an eyeball, ate only sticks for a month and got in a fight with Tora the cat, you'd be identical," said Sakura as she handed the Uchiha fan to him. "I think I'm gonna go to the library, so see you later. The quiet floor is always a good place to think." "Should we really let them split up?" asked Iruka into Kakashi's ear as Sakura fairly sprinted off with a dust cloud in her wake. "Well, if there was a coup, a ninja of Sarutobi's caliber would have made a mess before they got him," said Kakashi. "Plus, Indra only asked us to make sure the kids weren't going to go crazy or do anything foxy. Look, there he is now." Indra's telltale dark silhouette could be seen walking towards them, his gait visibly unsteady and swaying slightly. Kakashi waved a hand in greeting and gave the umbu sign for all clear. In response the older Uchiha gave him a thumbs up as the children swarmed around him. "So, what happened?" "What did Jiji say?" asked Naruto. "Did you find out who was lying to us?" said Sasuke, his expression tightening. Yes, I did, said Indra as he tapped a thick series of manila folders tucked under his stump. Along with a truly terrifying amount of A-rank classified paperwork. All the clan heads are going to be very busy soon, along with you Irika, so Kakashi, apologies in advance for ruining all your date nights. Speaking of ruining your night dash. Indra's free hand pulled out his wallet and fumbled for bills with fingers that were slower than normal, and Irika shook his head firmly. Don't even think about it, Indra. You needed help, and we were happy to step in. As a matter of fact, you'd be proud of Team 7 when you hear about how they've handled themselves today. Except for the part where Sasuke was on drugs, chimed Naruto with his mischievous grin. That started off another round of good-natured bickering that became increasingly incoherent the closer they got to the Uchiha estate and as Irika and Kakashi peeled off. Kids, said Indra with obvious effort, I promise I'll listen to whatever story you have to tell me, but right now, I really need a nap. Making sure the village didn't descend into fratricidal conflict really tires me out. Yeah, muttered Sasuke as his uncle unlocked the door and staggered towards the couch, collapsing into it face first. But what the hell do I do now? Unfortunately, Indra was out cold. Well, you're not allowed to brood about the fate of the Uchiha or whatever, said Karin. Stay right here, I'll be right back with my mom's scroll. Man, everybody's interested in scrolls lately, joked Naruto. I almost miss my spray paint. Sasuke slowly began to unwind over the course of the afternoon as he sat next to the Uzumaki and a sleeping Indra. He allowed himself to be engrossed in the dozens of seals their predecessors had used, the simple repetition of brush strokes as calming for him as it was surprisingly engrossing for his friend. If nothing else, understanding how they'd put together that paralysis seal might help him to break out of it when Naruto used it on him again. With her teammates' crisis at least temporarily averted, Sakura did what she always did when she felt uncertain or wanted to know more. She went to the library. Specifically, general psychology, followed by the anthropology section, dipping into religion, and emerging from the stacks with a vast number of scrolls in her arms. For once, she felt nervous, eyes darting around the empty aisles, as memories of accidentally seeing late-night shows on HBL came back to her. A sourceless feeling of I shouldn't be doing this fought against a memory of a warm Uchiha backyard and Kakashi's voice. Girls liking girls, Hound had said. It's just the same as girls liking boys, or boys liking boys. It's all natural, really. You'll understand when you're older. Sakura huffed in annoyance. Well, she was older and she still didn't understand, so as she tucked herself away in the quietest, hardest to spot corner, her mind turned inwards. Any advice? She asked her inner self. Hey, I know what I want, and what you want, but the particulars? Not so much. Let's learn at least a little bit more before we start asking anyone else questions. There was a pause then. I'm glad Karin was cool about it though. Sakura smiled. Yeah. 3 hours later, Sakura had devoured all the scrolls she'd picked up, dumped the less helpful ones on the shelving cart, and assaulted the Konoha Histories section with far less success. Kat's story about Mikoto Uchiha and Kushina Uzumaki had sounded romantic and tragic in equal measure when Sakura had first heard it, but now, with this coal of uncertainty burning inside her, it became frightening. Dry language about maintaining bloodline traits and discouraging deviation from tradition from Konoha's bloodline compendium gained new, unsettling meaning. Remember what Madame Juo said? About how not being part of a clan was a good thing. Good catch. Sakura still didn't have many of the details of Kushina's memory the Kyuubi had taunted her with, but she suspected it tied in somehow. In contrast, she couldn't imagine her parents objecting to whoever she decided to date, though that was a conversation she was absolutely going to avoid for the time being. She wanted to be sure, first. Yeah, I just know Mom's going to get teary-eyed about it. Do you think she's going to blame anyone? She did call Indra-sensei a ruffian or something, right? Maybe initially, you know how she gets wrapped up in her own head. Gee, I wonder if we got that. But Dad'll calm her down and at least I'm pretty sure he's got our back. Remember how he helped pick out Karen's ribbon? Yeah, that was nice of him. Sakura groaned quietly and rubbed at her tired eyes with the back of her hand. Let's go home. Wait, I just remembered something, said her inner self. Check the poetry section. A long-buried memory came bubbling to the surface of Sakura's mind, dredged up by her inner self of walking past a poetry reading, and stopping to linger. The speaker's lilting voice caught her attention, as did something else Sakura had never quite been able to put a name to, and which the girl still didn't have the right words to express. But the poetry did. Amidst the notes of Mikoto is another deep mysterious tone. A sound that comes from within my own breast. Her hair at 20. Flowing long and black. Through the teeth of her comb. Oh beautiful spring. Extravagant spring. Where the hell did that come from? Wondered Sakura. You're asking me? Said her inner self with equal bemusement. I'm the part of your mind that wants without knowing, that knows without wanting. Do you ask a fish how it knows to swim? Soon enough, Sakura emerged from the library with a freshly purchased satchel slung over her shoulder, weighed down with scrolls and headed home with her spoils. She stayed in her room until dinner, but her parents were dissuaded from probing by the expression of quiet wonder on her face. Still, research theory and art could only take her so far, though some of the poetry had been blunt and positively sensuous compared to what Sakura had been expecting. Sakura began a long, subtle campaign of espionage, information warfare, and intelligence gathering that mostly consisted of walking around Konoha and really looking at the people she passed. Who her inner self considered attractive, who was homely, and who passed by unremarked, and slowly, day by day, Sakura began to understand herself. She left scrolls of carefully chosen poetry open in her living room, knowing at least one of her parents would look with idle curiosity, and tried to relax. That same week, she brought a scroll to read on a bodyguarding mission to Tanzuku Town and read it on a sunny afternoon while Naruto and Sasuke were planting slippery, soap-based seals as impromptu land mines. Several feet away, Indra was also sitting with his feet up on his pack, scribbling away at the paperwork that now seemed to be in his hand at every opportunity, and when he looked over at her, Sakura waited in anxious silence to see his reaction to the title of her scroll. Characteristic of her teacher, it was a gentle smile, despite the harshness of his scarred visage. "Glad to hear you're taking my dating assignment seriously," he said. Sakura made a face. Even after all her efforts, she still wasn't sure how to actually approach someone for a date, so she danced around the subject and contented herself with poetry for now. "I could just be reading this for fun," she said defensively. Indra tilted his head slightly, still smiling. "You could," he agreed. "But Yasuno Akiko is famous for a certain kind of poetry." A nervous giggle escaped Sakura's mouth as she lowered her scroll. "I guess that wasn't very subtle, was it?" "On the contrary, it was a perfect opening gambit," said Indra with approval. "You allowed me to engage first, reserving your own initiative for when you were sure how I would respond. But that kind of subtlety won't work for your teammates over there, I'm afraid." "Can you tell them?" she asked, knowing what the answer was going to be, and Indra's laughter made both boys look up from their soap seals. "Oh, Amaterasu no. Trust me, you'll want to have this memory, because 20 years from now, you'll look back on it and laugh." Indra waved Naruto and Sasuke back to their work as Sakura felt herself settle in. "Well, why are you laughing now?" "It's just funny you found Akiko's poetry. That was my wife's favorite as well, though she found poetry much later in life than you did." His dark eye flickered red to capture Sakura's hesitant smile before she spoke again. "Which one was her favorite?" Indra chuckled. "Before, or after she'd had several glasses of wine?" "Because I think she'd kill me if I told you the latter." Sakura rolled her eyes. "I know there's plenty of them are about sex. My parents already gave me the talk." Still, her mentor would not speak, mocking her with a secretive smile that was marred by his genuine good humor. Sakura could recognize a doomed battle and so switched gears. "Fine then, tell me the other one." She saw Indra mouth a silent prayer of thanks to the gods and chose to ignore it, before he spoke. "I have the delusion that you are with me as I walk through the fields of flowers, under the moon." Sakura was silent, absorbing the poem in this fresh context as Indra waited patiently for her response. "It's beautiful," she said, "but also rather sad." "Well, I did remarry," said Indra. "But we both moved on and found happiness again. I think she enjoyed the reminder of our time together, how life has a tendency to mix together the joy and the heartache. The tinge of melancholy that had entered his voice vanished as he patted Sakura on the head. But you're young, and you shouldn't take my moaning so seriously. Go have fun. Well, how do I know if I'm ready? Asked Sakura as the boys finished their task and began running back to the tree. That's the thing, said Indra. You don't. It's like when you and Naruto taught Karen how to jump. Sometimes you have to take the leap on your own, without being ready. You know this'll just heal on its own, said Naruto as Sasuke held his arm in the green glow of medical ninjutsu and scowled at him. That just means if I mess up and reattach the wrong tendons, you won't be crippled for life, said the Uchiha heir as Indra strode away to reassure their client the bandits would no longer be a problem. Across the field, disheveled men and women with weapons struggled to pick themselves up, only to slip on the soapy, oily substance covering the ground and end up right back in the dirt. Against ninja who could use chakra to anchor themselves to anything, the seals were useless, but for bandits without chakra coils, it was the perfect solution. When the bandit leader, a B-rank ex-chunin from the land of the moon, had made it across the minefield and threatened them, Sakura and Sasuke had swiftly swept his legs out from under him and locked the man in a genjutsu simulating the frigid Arctic as Naruto started to talk about how the man should really just go back to his own village instead of bothering everybody else's. Indra had mentally given the speech 4 out of 10 Narutos, since nobody had started crying. But when the man slashed at Naruto's outstretched hand, Fox Fang rose and fell, knocking the man out cold and leaving him with what Sasuke could tell were several broken ribs as souvenirs. Now, they were all playing cleanup and Sasuke was using Naruto as his test dummy. So how come you're trying all this medical ninjutsu recently? Asked the Uzumaki as he wiped off Fox Fang in the grass. When Asuma-san said you should be a medical ninja, you said that was stupid. Sasuke kept his eyes on Naruto's slowly healing hand as he spoke. You know how Miyake Hakata came by to apologize, said Sasuke, and continued at Naruto's wince. That had been an intensely awkward conversation, but at least Indra had allowed Sasuke to counter with an apology of his own. In the end, Miyake had reluctantly accepted the truth of her parentage but did not want to be involved with the Uchiha clan in any way, shape, or form. For Sasuke, it had been a bitter pill to swallow and his teammates had been giving him space. Space he now was choosing to cross to heal Naruto as he continued to speak. Well, Uncle and I agreed that we don't tell Sai and Shin just yet, but there's still one other name within the village who's on that list. Remind me who that is again. Sasuke's shoulder punch only momentarily interrupted his healing, but he answered. Shibaki Uchiha, who I guess is older than me. Well, Uncle's been doing a lot of paperwork recently, so before we left, I went into his study and took a look. Naruto reflexively looked over his shoulder, but Indra had his back to them and was absorbing the merchant's tirade with his trademark stoicism. When he wanted to, their master could be surprisingly closed off. That seems way too easy, you know. Exactly, said Sasuke. The whole file was about Shibaki and he's apparently been in the Umbu all this time. As for the medical ninjutsu, well, I'm just glad the file didn't have pictures. Naruto's other hand squeezed his knee in sympathy and Sasuke looked up just in time to see his friend's face soften. His green chakra sputtered out and he felt his breath catch in his throat at the sight. He'd seen that face every morning at breakfast, soaked in sweat from training, and distorted by the Kyuubi no Kitsune. But he'd never seen Naruto look at him like this. The moment hung between them, as fragile as a soap bubble, and then Naruto's stupid arm ruined it by bleeding all over Sasuke's leg. After a minute or so of cursing on his part and some complaining from his patient as they both tried and failed to think of anything more meaningful to say, Naruto cleared his throat. Well, it's awfully nice of you to try and heal this Shibaki guy. I'm sure he'll appreciate it and all, but don't you think Konoha's other doctors could do something? No offense. Sasuke took the complicated tangle of emotions around his heart and put them to the side, to be examined later as he answered. It's not about actually healing him. It's about trying to make up for all these years where we didn't know where he was. I'm just healing you because you're the only one of us who was stupid enough to stand right in front of the enemy and let themselves get slashed. Gee, thanks, said Naruto, but the sarcasm meant nothing compared to the two hands holding his. That night, Team 7 was sleeping deeply when a set of ashy knuckles rapped on Indra's windowsill. Sasuke woke up, Sharingan blazing and kunao in hand, to see a familiar Umbu mask wave at him from the window. He slipped into the identity of Indra Uchiha as he scowled at Monkey and clambered out into the night air. "You're supposed to be in a cell," he hissed, and Monkey pointed at the other figure on the roof, whose long, blonde ponytail revealed him to be Inoichi Yamanaka. "That's my fault," admitted Inoichi, who took Indra's glare with his usual calm. "I've been digging around in Shivaki's head per Intel's security measures, but there was a condition he wanted me to meet." "Want to fight?" rasped Shivaki in a sandpaper growl. "Too long, Susanoo weakens. I was bored in my cell. I was locked up for a year and a half with a seal over my eyes and I didn't complain," snapped Indra. "Sage, does anyone even know you're both out of the village?" "Shikaku's not happy about it, but we're clear," said Inoichi as one of his hands made two hand signs out of Shivaki's sightline and two sentences drifted into Indra's head with feather softness. "We figure you're the person he's least likely to kill besides Sasuke and the only one who might be able to get past that armor. Call it a field test." Indra stared at the impassive ashy face with one red eye and one milky white, trying not to be creeped out. It was like looking into a funhouse mirror, seeing a version of himself where things had gone even worse. He switched on his own Sharingan to test Shivaki's response. "What do you think of my team?" "Children of Konoha are precious," said Shivaki. "But weak. They did not kill their targets. The mission is incomplete, so you failed." "The parameters of the mission were to defend the merchant caravan," said Indra evenly. "Killing the bandits was merely the simplest way to achieve that. They were no true threat, so I let my students test out their new techniques and in the end, no one needed to die. Besides," he admitted, "I'm trying to make sure they don't turn into us." Shivaki clenched his fist, sending ash fluttering down to coat the rooftop as red muscle was momentarily exposed. "Admirable, but still weak. Look, come back tomorrow afternoon at Kachika Lake and I'll duel you," said Indra as he pinched his nose. "Hells, go kill those bandits yourself, if you want to fight that badly. I'm going back to bed." He slid back down into the room and when he looked up, Inoichi and his mostly dead ward were gone. Team 7 had made good time that morning despite their sensei's intermittent yawning, and they'd stopped for an early lunch at a roadside tavern populated with travelers, merchants, and folk from all across the continent. This close to the Chunin exams, business was booming as ninja teams, government officials, and enthusiastic spectators made their way towards Konoha, so Team 7 leaned back against the bar and engaged in the ancient and time-honored custom of people watching. "Man, look at that guy at Sakura's 1115, said Naruto approvingly. "Think we could take him? He's built like a brick shit house." "Language, Naruto," chided Indra, but his genin ignored him. "So he's got muscles, big deal," said the girl in question. "I can make him think there's a bug on his face and he'll knock himself out trying to get it off." "What if he gets out of the jutsu and closes in on you?" asked Sasuke as he sipped on something with ice and fruit. "Then I bog him down with earth jutsu and hit his joints with my poison kunao. Or I can, whoa." Sakura trailed off as a blonde girl in obvious fishnets emerged from the crowd and began speaking with an older brown-haired woman in the tan vest of the Sand Village. "Sakura?" asked Sasuke as he peered over at her. "Hey," said her inner self. "You're never going to get a better opportunity than this. I mean, you'll never see that girl again, so just tell them now." Sakura took a deep breath. "That girl next to the Sand Jonin in front of Sasuke, with the blonde pigtails." Said the Uchiha. "What about her?" "I think she looks cute," said Sakura, trying for casual. "Hot, even." Indra snorted into his beer and wheezed as some of it went down the wrong pipe. Sakura bulldozed forward, remembering Indra's advice that subtlety was a concept Naruto and Sasuke were only vaguely aware of. "I mean, that dress shows off her shoulders and all the muscles on her arms." "Yeah," said Naruto as he peered at the girl. "I can see it. Not sure if the purple really works though." His teammate could feel the sweat gathering on the back of her neck. "Naruto, you get what I'm saying, right?" "Yeah," said the Uzumaki breezily. "You like girls? Well, go and talk to her then," said Sasuke decisively as his uncle pounded his chest with one hand and appeared in danger of falling off his barstool. Sakura's face blanched immediately as terror stole away the relief Naruto's casual pronouncement had given her. No way, no way. I couldn't dash. Naruto's hands propelled her off the refuge of her barstool and made Sakura take several steps forward into the crowd. Go for it, Sakura-chan. Sage's spit, sighed inner Sakura. Alright, let's do this. I'll get us there, you think of something cute and witty to say. Her feet moved and soon enough Sakura was winding her way through the tightly packed crowd. Behind her, Naruto turned to the Uchiha with an enormous grin on his face. Isn't that great, Sasuke? Sakura told us she likes girls, so we gotta be supportive. If you say so, said Sasuke. I can't imagine liking girls. Naruto nodded patiently as Indra entered into another coughing fit, and it took half a minute for Sasuke's much-abused brain to make the obvious connection at long last. Oh my god. Okay, we're here, said Sakura's inner self, now sweep her off her feet. She relinquished control of Sakura's body and the Konoha Gen and realized absolutely everything she was going to say was stupid, cheesy, or both. She dug in her pocket and came up with a spare hair tie for her ponytail as her other hand tapped the girl on one semi-exposed, muscular shoulder. Excuse me, she said brightly, I think you dropped this. The girl turned and took in Sakura's existence, teal eyes categorizing her as a Konoha ninja before peering at the hair tie in Sakura's hand. Her own hands moved back to reflexively check her own pigtails, to find them all still intact. Thanks, she said with a brief smile, but I'm fine. You from Konoha? Oh, thank the sage, she was initiating conversation. Yup, said Sakura and then instantly regretted it. Yup. I've been hanging around with Naruto way too long. She tapped the forehead protector she'd wrapped around her shoulder, indicating the spiral of the leaf before offering the girl her hand. I'm Sakura Harino, nice to meet you. Temari of the Sand, said the girl as she took Sakura's hand in a calloused grip. You in the Chunin exams this year? Her hands are rough, thought Sakura belatedly. She didn't know how to feel about that, then realized she needed to answer the question. Unfortunately no, she admitted, we kind of got in trouble with the grass village a while back, so my sensei thought it would be a good idea if we used the extra time to work on improving. I mean, there's one every 2 years, right? Next one's in Sand, said Temari with a wink, so then if I don't make it here, then it'll be my turn to have the home field advantage. Sakura grinned. Hey, you want to travel with us? We know all the fastest routes that aren't going to be clogged with travelers, so it'll get you to Konoha much faster. Plus, I can show you the sights. Temari's sensei leaned over and whispered something in the blonde's ear, and Temari's head nodded so fast she produced a small whirlwind. That sounds great. We'll meet you outside. She moved away to her team, a boy in black with 3 scrolls strapped into a carrying case, as well as a shorter redhead with 3 small gourds wrapped in white cloth. As Sakura watched, one of his hands shot out and snatched an unattended beer, but when it reached his lips, he paused to look at it with genuine confusion. Shit, muttered the Sand Jonin. Gaara. Put that down. She bustled off as Sakura drifted back to the bar in something of a daze. So, how'd it go? Asked Indra as Naruto nestled his head between his hands in expectation of a juicy story. I think she liked me, said Sakura faintly. I mean, I offered for her and her team to come with us to Konoha, and she said yes. Way to go, Sakura-chan, cheered Naruto as he slapped her on the back. Her riposte punch paused when she noticed Sasuke staring into his empty glass as if it held all the secrets in the world. Indra-sensei, did you put Sasuke in a genjutsu or something? He doesn't look so good. Oh, that, said Indra as he slung Sasuke over his shoulder and left a few bills under his empty glass. I have my suspicions, but it's not my place to say. She looked at Naruto, but he just shrugged. As one, Team 7 filed out after the Sand Ninja, who were waiting to begin introductions only for a cloaked figure to intercept Indra as he emerged from the crowd. I have been waiting, Indra Uchiha, rasped the figure. Kachiko Lake is easily reachable from here. I'm kind of in the middle of something, Shivaki, said Indra. Or do you not see the kid on my back? Hiding behind a child is a coward's tactic, rasped the figure as Naruto's hand found Fox Fang's hilt. Wait, isn't Shivaki dash? Hold him, rasped the figure as he dumped Sasuke into Naruto's arms, unconcerned that Indra's sword was already swinging for his neck. Sakura's hands came together, but Indra's sword had rebounded out of his grip and gone spinning up over the crowd to panicked screams. "Dirty pool, Shivaki," chided Indra, but the anger on his face was real. "Where's Inoichi? Tried to stop me, so I knocked him out," rasped the figure as Naruto's fox fang likewise rebounded against a flash of red samurai armor. "He is quite safe, provided you agree to our fight." An armored glove with white wrappings tapped the cloaked man on the shoulder politely. "I'd ask you to step outside," said the Sand Jonin with a wry grin, "but since we're already here, I can skip the preamble." She reared back and the phoenix mask of Shivaki's protective armor cracked under the blow as he was sent flying up in an arc away from the crowd. Indra laughed out loud, a full-throated laugh of pure delight far removed from his usual understated chuckle, and took the Sand Jonin's offered hand to haul himself to his feet. "Gods, I've missed you. Did you actually dye your hair, or is this Tsunade's alteration jutsu?" "Dyed it," said the woman as she winked at Sakura with startlingly blue-green eyes that mirrored her own. "I will say, going back to our glory days was an unexpected side effect, but really? Indra Uchiha? That was the best that you could come up with." Indra pulled aside his hair and eye patch to reveal the patchwork of scars around the ugly hole in his face as his Sharingan whirled. "Well, subtlety has never been my thing." The Jonin both froze for several seconds then blinked as she responded. "Bullshit, that was subtle, you just don't bother." "Speaking of subtlety, what name do you go by these days?" Sensei," shouted the black-robed boy from the sand as trees began to topple behind them. "That guy with the red armor's coming back." "I'm Inari of the Iron Fist," said the woman to Team 7 as Sasuke staggered to his feet. "I used to be married to your idiot master there." "Nice to finally meet you, Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura." Indra held out his hand and his sword flew to him, and the moment it touched his hand black lightning ignited along the blade. "We should probably go deal with Shivaki," he said. "I'm afraid he's one of mine. Want to join me?" Inari grinned and punched her own palm with relish. "Are you kidding?" she laughed. "An idiot Uchiha to beat into the ground. You couldn't have got me a better present." Both Jonin were gone in a cloud of dust as the Sand Genin converged on Team 7. Still, Sasuke's shocked whisper spoke for all of them. "What the fuck?" Chapter 50, Lost and Found PT5, Look What the Raccoon Dragged In. The first thought in Indra's head was, "I recognize that punch," followed by "I recognize that voice." He laughed as joy and relief flooded his chest, washing away a subtle weariness he hadn't known was there, and when Sakura Haruno offered him one bandage-wrapped hand up, he took it with gusto. "Gods, I've missed you. Did you actually dye your hair, or is this Tsunade's alteration jutsu?" "Dyed it," said Sakura as she winked at her younger self with her sea-green eyes. "I will say, going back to our glory days was an unexpected side effect, but really? Indra Uchiha? That was the best that you could come up with." In all fairness, he'd been drugged to the gills and suffering from a hole in his head, so yes, in the moment it had been. But Indra wasn't going to say that out loud. He pulled aside his hair and eye patch to reveal the patchwork of scars around the ugly hole in his face as his Sharingan whirled. "Well, subtlety has never been my thing." He was pulled into her mind to a vast forest, outlined in chiaroscuro delineations of black and white, so much like Itaka's own Tsukuyomi that it always put him off. He suspected that was why Sakura always portrayed her mental landscape this way, a not-so-subtle reminder that though he had started the genjutsu, she was the one in control of her mind. Still, he smiled and put aside the thin cloak that was the identity of Indra Uchiha. "It's good to see you, Sakura," he said quietly, but with real feeling. He held out a hand she ignored in favor of one of her crushing bear hugs, but Sasuke accepted the creaking of his bones as the price of being reunited. "I'd say it's nice to see you," she joked as she brushed aside his hair, but Sakura gasped and ran a hand across her friend's scarred cheek, which trembled at its passage. "Oh, your poor face." Sasuke leaned into the touch despite himself as he realized how long it had been since he'd been touched, or rather, allowed someone he truly trusted to touch his face like that. He sighed. "Not exactly going to be on the intelligence officer pin-up calendar anymore, am I?" Sakura blew a raspberry at him. "Please, you hated those photo shoots, but the levity she had was draining away as Suzuki's free hand came up to entwine her fingers with his, pulling her hand away from the hole in his head. Not to impose, but we don't have much time in here. Think you can fix it? That Suzuki with the white arrows followed us back and I lost the Susanoo. He's been suspiciously silent since we found traces of him in Orochimaru's hideout. Sakura let go of his hand and cupped her chin in thought. Obviously, I'd need an actual hospital, but I can't make any promises. Your Rinnegan was a damn complicated organ, Suzuki. Think computer circuitry complex, so rebuilding it from scratch might not be possible. Speaking of complex, she sighed. We should get our lies straight, shouldn't we? Suzuki nodded grimly. I tried to stick as close to the truth as possible, but... Yeah, tough to save the world from a padded cell, said Sakura. Let's see, I'm Inari of the Iron Fists, currently a jonin in the Sand Village, ex-bounty hunter, studied medical ninjutsu at Kamshiro University in the land of hot springs, used to be married to an Uchiha, which is how I know the Leaf Village. That'll work, said her ex-husband. I'm Indra Uchiha, Fugaku's bastard with a Cloud Noble during the Third Great Ninja War, unofficial Uchiha bloodline guardian, also an ex-bounty hunter, current Leaf Jonin. Used to be married to a brilliant medical ninja who could throw around mountains, and an idiot Uzumaki husband who are both too good for me. I'm flattered, grinned Sakura, and I'm sure Naruto would be too. The moment of levity withered on the vine as they both remembered a windswept rainstorm and a desperate battle over crumbling ruins. The forest of Sakura's mind rustled with hidden movement before going unnaturally still. What do you think happened to them? Asked Suzuki quietly. I try not to think about it, because I know if I dwell on it too long. He walked 2 fingers forward and pantomimed falling off a cliff. Thank the gods for the kids, said Sakura, sounding like the 60-something woman she was in truth. I know mine are the only things getting me up every day. She shot Suzuki an inquisitive look. So, how badly have you messed us up this time? Nobody's defected yet, said Indra with a ghost of a smile. Some things are better, some are just different. I'll fill you in over that drink, it'll be funnier that way. Something in how he said it made Sakura relax and her cheery manner returned with a light chuckle. See, at some point in the last 40 years, Naruto and I managed to graft a sense of humor onto you, so I look forward to that. Your most successful surgery so far, said Suzuki as he allowed the identity of Indra Uchiha to wrap around his brain once more. And speaking of success, we should introduce ourselves right about now. The genjutsu fell apart as both ninja returned to the world of the living, surrounded by 2 genin teams and a crowd of civilians. Sakura blinked and Indra knew her inner self was reminding her of the words they'd exchanged just before the genjutsu had started. Something about subtlety. Bullshit, that was subtle, you just don't bother. Speaking of subtlety, what name do you go by these days? Sensei, shouted Kankuro as trees began to topple behind them. That guy with the red armor's coming back. I'm Inari of the Iron Fist, said Sakura to Team 7 as Indra's younger self staggered to his feet. I used to be married to your idiot master there. Nice to finally meet you, Naruto, Suzuki, Sakura. Indra held out his hand and his sword flew to him, and the moment it touched his hand black lightning ignited along the blade. We should probably go deal with Shivaki, he said. I'm afraid he's one of mine. Want to join me? Inari grinned and punched her own palm with relish. Are you kidding? She laughed. An idiot Uchiha to beat into the ground. You couldn't have got me a better present. They vanished into a shunshin at almost the exact same moment, leaving their teams behind as they plowed into the red-armored form of Shivaki Uchiha emerging from the trees. The boom of the dual impact with his red armor sent animals scattering into the air as Shivaki went airborne again. Indra winced and shook his hand out. Punching Susanoo armor without protection of your own hurt. So what's this guy's deal? Asked Inari as they followed the trail of black lightning down towards Kachiko Lake. Her ex-husband shrugged. Still not sure. He's an Uchiha who survived the massacre and subsequent funeral pyre by using Izanagi, mostly by accident, and Danzo picked him up for his off-the-books assassinations. We found him when the third Hokage finally had enough and decided to clean house. We threw Danzo in the deepest, darkest cell we could find. Inari grinned in satisfaction. About damn time. I'm surprised you didn't stab him as item number 1 on your to-do list. Oh, believe me, I wanted to, said Indra ruefully. But he knows just enough secrets and has been just useful enough to defer his execution for now. Devil's bargain, muttered Inari as she vaulted a log. Believe me, you're preaching to the converted, said the Uchiha. Honestly, I also think half the reason he's still alive is because the clan heads are all trying to figure out who should be first in line to start breaking pieces off of him. Speaking of breaking things, let's try to keep this guy alive. He's an ass, but... Yeah, he's your ass, got it, said Inari as she waved him off. Indra rolled his single eye. He's not, whatever. They emerged from the trees onto the bank of Kachika Lake, clear blue water sloping down from the foot of a forested hill, with wide gravelly beaches. Shivaki Uchiha was picking himself out of the middle of the lake and he folded his arms. 2 against 1, he rasped with what could have been a frown on the remains of his face. Not fair. You endangered my students, snapped Indra. Whatever happened to children are precious. Would you have fought otherwise? Indra refused to admit he had a point as Inari rolled her shoulders in preparation. You gonna surrender then? The questionably ex-root agent beckoned her and his Susanoo echoed the gesture. Come find out. Indra switched to a reverse grip on his sword and allowed his cloak to fall to the gravel as lightning armor enveloped him. Amaterasu, he intoned, sun goddess and mother to us all, forgive me for the violence I am about to inflict upon this fool. They carved furrows in the lake as Shivaki drew his Umbu sword and his Susanoo drew 2 more, meeting Indra and Inari in an explosion of force. All 3 pushed forward, gauging the other's strength as Inari's barrage of punches were blocked or deflected by the Susanoo. Indra disengaged with a whirl, using the speed of his lightning armor to circle to Shivaki's other side, only to be met by an armored orange foot to the shoulder. He raced a lightning charge up the Susanoo, trying to penetrate the relative weak spots beyond the armor, where the chakra concentration was weakest, and was gratified to see Shivaki twitch and move away from him. The mostly dead Uchiha lashed out with all 3 swords and Inari was forced to backflip away across the water to avoid being skewered. Even then, a red sword sliced a line in the shoulder of her sand flak jacket before she batted it away. First blood to the new guy, she said. Mind explaining why you're doing this? Without conflict, Susanoo weakens, said Shivaki. Sherry non-variations, sighed Indra. Are such a pain, finished Inari as she picked up the thought. You don't see this kind of variation in the Byakugan until _. My husband's divorce is not representative of the Hyuga clan as a whole, said Indra as he and Inari closed in, arms raised at shoulder height. You're the one with the psychology degree. _. Lariat, finished Inari as their arms caught Shivaki Uchiha between them, sending him tumbling head over heels as the opposing forces wrenched his body in opposite directions. He recovered with a mid-air flip and grinned at them. Good, he said with more emotion than Indra had ever heard from him. Still not enough to breach my armor. Agreed Inari as she stalked back around to Indra's side, idly avoiding the swords spearing her way in telltale Umbu-trained patterns they both recognized. Not a lot of flammable materials out on this lake, she said, and Indra raised an eyebrow. Is that wise? Please, he's a human charcoal briquette. Like he can get any more burnt. Besides, you've got me, so he can only get better. Shivaki turned curiously towards her at that last statement, and that was when Indra struck, pointing his stump as his eye bled. Flame control, black hand, as Inari's hands made 3 signs in quick succession. Water style, tide chains. The water surged up, bringing Shivaki to his knees as fresh water chains wrapped around his Susanoo. The red armor dissolved them with a flex, but they'd held him just long enough for the explosive punch of black flame from Indra's stump to begin eating into the Susanoo. It also had the advantage of obscuring his vision as Inari leaped up to bring 2 clenched fists down on the crown of the phoenix mask. It shattered with a sound like broken glass as the burnt Uchiha was pushed beneath the waves in a cloud of hissing steam and bubbles. Indra blinked as the small amount of black flame on Inari's gauntlets was snuffed out and ran an exploratory charge of the Chidori spear down into the water, to little effect. So, he said while they waited for their opponent to surface, mind explaining why I saw Gaara try to drink a pint of beer the size of his head back there? Inari winced. As I'm sure you've already figured out, we solve one problem, we usually create another. Big or small, but overall, I think things are trending in the right direction. I agree, said Indra, but you're avoiding the question. They both jumped back as twin enormous red swords the size of pillars shot up from the depths of the lake and narrowly missed the two time travelers. Yeah, because this is a discussion I want to have when we're not fighting another one of your questionably sane relatives. My family didn't cause this much trouble. Remember when we came home with Sarada? Indra called as he spun a miniature water spout into existence with wind chakra. My ribs begged to differ. Team 7 of the Leaf, and Team 2 of the Sand scrambled out onto the beach just in time to watch the fight begin, followed shortly by half the bar. Well, almost everyone scrambled. The red-haired kid just drifted over all of them on a little cloud of sand before it set him down next to Tamari. Tamari, he said with a surprisingly deep voice for someone so young. Should I go help? The blonde girl shook her head and patted her teammate's shoulder. No need, Gaara. Fighting over water's not safe for you and Sensei's clearly got this. The boy nodded and turned to regard Team 7 with a serious expression. Very well. But who are you, since our master felt the need to interfere? Sakura held out her hand. I'm Sakura Harano, this is Sasuke Uchiha and Naruto Uzumaki, we're from the Leaf Village. A clump of sand pumped Sakura's hand up and down twice in something close to a handshake as Gaara blinked. I see. She noticed that Tamari and the other boy also seemed to react to their names as Gaara's sand flowed back into several of the smaller gourds around his waist. You've heard of us? She asked uncertainly and the boy in black robes shrugged. Yeah, here and there. I'm Kankuro, and this is Tamari and Gaara of the desert. Huh, said Naruto as he half-waved at Tamari. It's nice to meet ya, then. You are Naruto Uzumaki? Asked Gaara as he pushed forward to look up at Naruto. Tamari and Kankuro exchanged a glance of mutual apprehension as Sakura reached out towards Gaara's shoulder. Hey, that's rude. A billow of sand intercepted Sakura's hand and pushed her back gently. Please do not touch me, said Gaara, his eyes still staring at Naruto's increasingly concerned face. It is pleasant to finally meet you, Naruto Uzumaki, he bowed slightly. My mother he coughed, Master has said much about you, as host of the Nine Tails. I am Gaara, host of the One-Tailed Shukaku. Team 7's eyes bugged out of their sockets and Sasuke slid between Naruto and Gaara. Tamari groaned as Kankuro slapped a hand to his face. Gaara, she said with exasperation, that was supposed to be a secret. All 6 of them looked up as a loud crack rang across the water to cheers from the spectators, followed by a plume of water and hissing steam. Sasuke, blurted his blonde friend, can you see Indra-sensei? It's the Sharingan, not the Byakugan, snapped the Uchiha who nonetheless still stared out over the water with red eyes. It's far out and they're moving so fast it's tough to follow. Sakura dug in her pack and produced a pair of binoculars, which she immediately had to protect from several scalpers trying to purchase them from her at ridiculous rates. Oh, for the love of she trapped 2 of the particularly grabby ones in a paralysis chapter 1 genjutsu as she raised them to her head. The brown-haired woman who'd called herself Inari and the telltale blue and purple blob that was Indra were leaping back and forth dodging red spikes that were jabbing up over and over from the water, transforming the surface of the lake into a choppy turmoil. I do not see what the problem is, sister, said Gaara as a hint of petulance entered into his gravelly voice. Would deception not defeat the purpose of our journey to Konoha? Besides, I am pleased to finally meet the one mother has spoken of so highly. Secrets are nothing but trouble, agreed Sasuke absently as Naruto bowed back to Gaara with a grin. Well, I know I'm not supposed to talk about it a bunch, but it's nice to meet you. Maybe we can talk about it later and stuff. That would be acceptable, agreed the redhead as he turned back to the battle and closed one eye with 2 fingers. Naruto noticed he'd ringed his eyes with heavy black makeup that on closer inspection, appeared to be markings similar to his own whiskers. The Uzumaki whistled as sand from the other Jinchuriki's gourds flowed up and coalesced into the shape of an eye, which moved off in the direction of the fight. Tamari, Kankuro, he said. Shall I attempt to narrate the battle for you? He frowned slightly. As Uchiha remarked, they are very fast. I'm good, said his brother and Tamari shook her head as well. A small beige figure was too slow and was flung upwards from the impact of one of the massive red spikes, to gasps from the crowd. "Mother is intact," announced Gaara. "She was able to catch the blade dash." "She's not our mother, Gaara," sighed Kankuro in a tone that meant they'd had this exchange before. "She told Dad she had no interest in marrying him. A fact which has only raised her higher in my regard," said Gaara to a quiet chuckle from Naruto, Sakura, and several spectators. "But does she not fulfill the same function for us?" "At this point, you're just deliberately ignoring our explanation," said Temari as a spiral of wind began to pull the lake water up into a waterspout. Naruto and Sakura giggled. "I have given Mother a platform with my sand," announced Gaara. "I cannot see, but she now has leverage." A distant Chan-Naro, from the beige figure, saw the red sword, along with the rest of the now two-story armored figure, dragged upwards from the lake's concealing water as a bright line seared itself across the spectator's vision. "Go uncle," cheered Sasuke as the waterspout formed itself into a dragon, crackling with lightning chakra and bit down. "Combination move," shouted two voices in unison. "The teeth of the heavens. The teeth of the sea." Everyone, even Gaara, ducked as an enormous explosion above them saw the red armor shatter as a downpour of rain followed just behind it. When Indra and Inari strolled back to the shore with an unconscious Shivaki Uchiha between them, they were greeted by a roar of applause as well as their soaked genin teams. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, counted Inari. "Nice to see nobody got kidnapped." Gaara blew his own cover though, grumbled Kankuro, while his sensei merely smiled as if she'd expected that. "All right, Indra," she said. "You lost the Uchiha toss when you called heads." Indra picked up his cape and threw it over a shivering Sakura as he turned to the crowd. "All right then," he shouted, projecting his voice. "Thank you for attending this preview of the Chunin exams, hopefully we'll see you all there. Have a good day." At the clear dismissal, some of the crowd began to disperse back in the direction of the road while others clamored closer, causing Gaara and Sasuke to both scowl and inch away from the crowd towards their teammates. "How annoying." "Yeah." Several shadow clones in a sand substitution later, Teams 7 and 2 found themselves back on the road as Naruto's recounting of the battle exploded into overdrive. "Oh man. Sensei, when you did that whole tornado thing, that was so cool. And Inari-sensei, when you just pulled that guy out of the water like it was nothing. Holy crap." Inari laughed and patted Naruto on his damp head. "Yes, we're pretty great Naruto," she said as she turned to Indra. "I've missed this." "Only because you haven't had to bail them out of danger at every turn," said Indra as he smiled at Sasuke and Sakura, who were huddled next to the fire in Sasuke's hand in an attempt to dry off. "Hey," said Sakura suspiciously as she stared at the sand ninja. "How come you knew about Naruto at all?" "Isn't it obvious, Sakura?" grinned her friend. "It's because I'm so awesome and we kicked so much butt against those stone ninja that we're in the bingo book now." Sasuke kicked his friend in the thigh and contented himself with this minor torment. "That's not a good thing, dumbass. Remember, that was supposed to be a diplomatic mission." "Hopefully ours turns out better than yours," said Temari, as Sakura smiled back at her. "Oh, I'm sure it will." Both teams traveled back in the direction of Konoha as unnoticed. Indra and Inari quietly reached out and tapped their fists together in silent congratulations. Some time later, Inari had gotten tired of carrying the unconscious Umbu agent on her shoulder and thrown him backwards in Kankuro's direction with a shouted "think fast." A gangly multi-armed puppet exploded from one of Kankuro's scrolls in a puff of smoke and grabbed Shivaki in a clatter of wood and ball joints as the sand ninja scowled. "Sensei, I thought we were done with those exercises." "We were," said Inari breezily. "I changed my mind." "Speaking of changing minds," said a new voice from behind them, "I think it's best you hand him to me and forget you saw anything." The group turned to see a dust-covered, tired, and very irritated Inoichi Yamanaka tramping towards them with one outstretched hand. Indra's expression brightened slightly. "Ah good, I was wondering what our mutual menace had done with you." "Buried me in a mine shaft," grunted Inoichi. "And since I'm not an Earth-style user, I had to get out the hard way." The assembled genin murmured meaningless apologies and Inoichi's gaze softened slightly as he gestured at Kankuro. "No offense kid, but it's probably not the best idea for someone not from the same village to be holding that one when he wakes up. More likely you'll get stabbed, and since the Chunin exams are so close, that would be some bothersome paperwork. Kankuro's puppet handed over the unconscious Shivaki, and Inoichi strode up to walk on Indra's right side, noting that he'd allowed the Sand Jonin to take his vulnerable left. Indra, who's this lot? Only the third best thing to ever happen to him, said the brown-haired woman, which caused the Uchiha to frown. You and Sarada jointly hold that second place slot, Inari, he said. No guesses who number one is? Inoichi contemplated the exchange and pointed one accusatory finger at the woman. You're his ex-wife. Yes, so all's well that ends well, she said before knocking on the trunk of a passing tree. That's the goal anyway. We're doing well so far, said Indra with quiet satisfaction. Just wait until you see the Uchiha district. Speaking of the district, uncle, interrupted Sasuke as he removed Shivaki's mask. Would this be the third survivor you didn't want me to see just yet? Indra nodded. You can see why, he said as the smell of rotten meat dominated the road. After numerous gagging noises, Sasuke replaced the mask. Not a pretty picture, inside or out. Said his younger self. So why'd he attack you? I heard something about a duel. Indra, muttered Inoichi, perhaps save the conversation for less delicate ears. Even if she's your ex-wife, the ex part is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. I told you before, said Indra with a suddenly serious tone. Our loyalties lie not with any one village, but with the people within them. Konoha has nothing to fear from Inari. Or her team, added Temari with a huff. Has the Sand not been steadfast allies of the Leaf? Inoichi was forced to conclude that they had, but a warning look told his friend to watch his tongue. Apparently, said Inari as if the Yamanaka had never spoken, his guardian spirit thrives on battle. Say, she said as the idea hit her, when we make camp tonight, why not let me take a crack at healing him? Let me help too, burst out Sasuke as adult head swiveled towards him. No offense, Sasuke, the woman said gently. But these wounds are going to be a medical puzzle for me to work with. I don't think whatever few medical ninjutsu Indra taught you are going to help. Then teach me. Sasuke planted his feet and put as much conviction into his gaze as he could. Sensei, you said I should be thinking about ways to help my friends, unconventional ways to go after Itachi? Well, what's more unconventional than an Uchiha medical ninja? You should play to your strengths, said Inoichi doubtfully. I've been an active ninja for 32 years and I can count the number of Uchiha medics on half of one hand. Well, maybe if there'd been more Uchiha medics, countered Sasuke, there's be more Uchiha with us today. Silence fell as the group stopped walking. The Konoha ninja were looking at Sasuke like he'd gained a second head, and when Gaara opened his mouth, Temari put a finger to his lips. Inari strode over and got in his face, giving him an up-close look at how soon as deserts could weather someone old beyond their years. Her eyes, which had been full of mirth or at least good cheer, had gone hard, like diamond or gemstones. Sasuke Uchiha, she said with a voice like a cold desert night. Why do you want to become a medical ninja? So if my family gets hurt, I can keep them safe, said Sasuke. If my brother comes back, I can keep them alive. So when we beat him, I can keep his mewling, limbless corpse aware long enough to see that the Uchiha district is alive again in spite of him. That we're better than whatever stupid thing he's trying to do. So if other people need help the way I did, I can do the same for them. He stuck out his bottom lip and gave her the most intense Uchiha glare he could, complete with Sharingan. Inari tilted her head slightly, studying him like she would a patient. Indra, she said with her eyes still on him. Is this your doing? I had no idea he was thinking about this, said Indra truthfully. You think he's up to it? Now he felt his uncle's eye on him, and despite the temptation to squirm, Sasuke kept still, waiting for a verdict. He doesn't have your chakra control, said Indra. But his blade work means he's got nimble fingers, he understands the grounding principles of medical ninjutsu, and he's hung around me long enough. I think he's got the right perspective for it. Despite himself, Sasuke blinked, breaking eye contact with Inari. Uncle, was that an eye joke? I don't see what you're getting at. Sasuke and Inari gave Indra the finger at the same time, and oddly enough, Perhaps that was what pushed the Sand Jonin over the edge. Alright, fine, she relented. I guess I can revolutionize Konoha's emergency room treatments some other time. One slender finger speared down to jab Sasuke's nose, causing him to go cross-eyed tracking it. But starting tomorrow morning, I'm going to run your hands so absolutely ragged you can forget about anything more complicated than chopsticks. Sasuke bared his teeth as he accepted the challenge. I wouldn't have it any other way. As night fell, it was a surprisingly cheerful little company that made its way to the gates of Konoha, tired, but pleased to have arrived at their destination. Rado waved them down as Gaara's sand obligingly deposited the still unconscious Shivaki into Inoichi's arms. The tall blonde man spoke briefly with Rado and vanished into a shunshin, his chakra signature moving in the direction of the Umbu's underground hospital behind the stone faces as the Chunin approached with his ever-present clipboard and flashlight. Ah, Team 7, good to have you back. How was your mission? Sasuke shrugged absently as his eyes devoured a scroll on organ placement. Fine. Naruto's more voluminous assessment that Indra and Inari-sensei were totally awesome and Gaara was going to be his new best Biju buddy washed over Rado and left no understanding behind. Glad to see someone's still in a good mood. He turned to the Sand Ninja and raised an eyebrow. And you are? Raza Tanmuk's Team 2, from Tsunagakur, said Inari as she pulled two very official-looking scrolls from her pack. You should be expecting us. We were, admitted Rado as he flipped through several pages on his clipboard. But not for another month at least. We were in the area, shrugged Inari as Kankuro stifled a yawn. Team 7 just proved so interesting, I figured Diplomat's prerogative would smooth out any issues. Well, hedged Rado. Let me just run that up the chain. He ran over to Izumo and the two gate guards began speaking. Though inaudible, their agitated body language made it clear they were trying to decide which one of them would run into the village to deliver the news. Temari leaned on her mentor, more out of affection than exhaustion, but none of the Leaf Ninja commented. You'd think they'd show the Kazekage children greater respect. That's why they're so nervous in the first place, pointed out Indra as the rest of Team 7 stared at their traveling companions with surprise and, in Sakura's case, a tinge of horror as she realized she'd been hitting on the Kazekage's daughter. It matters not, declared Gaara, glaring back down the road as if his hostility could carry all the way to Suna. I have renounced my father's ties, which is why I am now Gaara of the desert. His gaze softened as he looked at Temari and Kankuro, whose expressions held far less fear than Indra remembered from the first Chunin exams. You two are tolerable enough. Love you too, Gaara, said Kankuro. Indra felt a tug on his sleeve and he looked down at a sleepy-eyed Naruto. Sensei, if the village doesn't let them in, can they stay with us? The Uchiha district is not a bed and breakfast, Naruto, said Sakura, who was also leaning on her sensei now. Geez. Temari scoffed. So soft, as if we'd need your charity. Of course, that had Naruto rallying immediately. Come in, Pineapple Head, it's late and we're all tired, so quit the tough act. Pineapple. You little dash. Fortunately for Sand Leaf relations, and their master's fraying tempers, Izumo reappeared with a map of the Leaf Village, several brochures, and a ticket he gave to Inari. We'll be putting you up in the Hakama Inn for now, if you'll follow me. Excellent, said Inari as her team made noises of approval. I'll see you tomorrow, she said while her hand signed a quick sequence into Indra's palm below his cloak. Meet you at Hosengo's in half an hour. The Sand Ninja left as Indra likewise herded Team 7 back to Sakura's home and then to the Uchiha district. Perhaps unsurprisingly, even though Indra and Sasuke were fairly dead on their feet, Naruto was still, metaphorically, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed thanks to Temari's comment, and it was only when Sasuke threatened to knock him unconscious with Fox Fang did Naruto agree to get to sleep. Indra was unsurprised to arrive at Hosengo's Grill, the well-frequented spot on Konoha's main thoroughfare, to find Inari, or rather, Sakura, waiting for him at the bar, surgeon's fingers dissecting one of the olives in her martini. She'd shed her tan Suna armor, as well as the bandages and cloth that marked her as an outsider, and through the subtle shift in her posture, Indra could guess that some unseen mental barriers had fallen as well. Sensing the muffling barrier she'd already put up, Indra allowed the idea of Indra Uchiha to dissolve back into him, sitting down as Sasuke Uchiha once more. Sakura nodded at the empty seat and the respectable tankard of beer in front of it. I got you that amber ale you like, Sasuke. Thanks, he hesitated. Sakura. It feels weird to hear your own name again, doesn't it? Directed at me, yes. I've been critiquing our younger selves' taijutsu forms for the last 3 years, so it's probably not as weird for me as it was for you today. I've been using the 10 enumerations Ino and I developed to segment my consciousness, you. Indra sank into his seat and flared his chakra as a second muffling barrier settled into place around them. The Yamanaka Mind Sublimation Jutsu. Sakura sipped at her martini while Indra took a long drink from his mug. Drinking this afternoon, drinking now, we're both a couple of alcoholics, aren't we? We weren't grabbing for beers at 13 though. Sakura chuckled. Gaara's fine, honestly. Just a minor side effect of the process he volunteered for so he can sleep soundly now. I gathered something had changed since you felt comfortable leaving him with Temari and Kankuro and he didn't threaten to kill anyone this afternoon. Indra frowned. But you know as little about sealing jutsu as I do, so how'd you dash? Oh, I didn't touch Gaara's seal, said Sakura as she waggled her fingers. Rather than approach the problem from a Funinjutsu angle, I looked at it from a more practical perspective. Her ex-husband shuddered and took a long pull from his drink. What did you do to that poor Biju? Barely anything, honestly. She raised her hand in the medical ninja oath. I just went in and altered the neurons of Gaara's brain so he could sleep peacefully. Downside is, every once in a while, Shikako gets access to his motor functions instead, and since he's a constantly drunk, constantly randy alcoholic raccoon. Can't imagine his father was pleased with that, said Sasuke. Well, once he stopped stationing half a platoon in Gaara's room to watch him sleep, he was overjoyed and signed me on as personal medical ninja to the Kazekige's family. Even got to talk trade with old Granny Cho, who was a much harder sell. So you were the one who beat her grandson into rubble and delivered him to the Kazekage, said Sasuke as he stole the olive from her martini. Not exactly the right foot to start out on. Sakura shrugged. It all worked out in the end. I had to dodge a marriage proposal from Raza in the second year, but not exactly your diplomatic nightmare in grass. Sasuke swallowed hard and barely avoided choking on the olive before swiveling to stare at her with all the astonishment a one-eyed man could muster. So when Gaara called you mother, he was being serious. She gave him a flat look. It took our original Gaara several decades to make a joke, of course a younger Gaara wouldn't joke about that. The kids were disappointed when I said no, but they took it better than I'd thought. Sasuke knew from the tone of her voice that she was understating something in that sentence, but chose to let it go as Sakura continued. But other than that, I've been leveraging my pediatric psychology to the hilt and I'd estimate their parental complexes are about half dismantled. How've your little monsters been? I scoured every intelligence report I could beg, borrow, or steal, but Sakura Harano's only ever mentioned in passing. Then Sans intel agents are fools, said Sasuke around the rim of his glass. Half the reason I banned them from competing in the Chunin exams is because they're already roughly at Chunin skill level. Just not at an emotional level. He waved his stump in exasperation. Take the implied insult if you want, but I've been putting a bit more care into their development considering, well, they're us, said Sakura with dry humor. The whole let's not repeat the same mistakes thing is making Tsunade-sensei's old comments ring a bit more true, for sure. Orochimaru didn't say anything like that, said Sasuke, playing into the joke. Considering his head sealed into a scroll in the Hokage's vault. I'll admit, said Sakura, sliding her empty glass down the bar and gesturing for another, that was fun to read about in the papers. You know, subtlety was never my thing. Sakura let out a laugh with a hint of long dried up bitterness. Sakura, marry me. Sakura, is divorce the best option? Sakura, I'm going to marry Naruto. Why is it you can infiltrate criminal organizations, get Shimura Danzo to release his little tyke bombs, and scare the pants off of several Kage, but when it comes to our family, you totally botched it. Sasuke just sighed and accepted the criticism. Because I cared about what my family thought, he said, so I was afraid of failing you. Sakura made an exaggerated frown. Ah, am I getting mopey Sasuke or argumentative Sasuke this time around? You'll be getting a swift kick in the pants if you forget my name again, retorted Indra, who had his eye on the door and his mind cloak back on. Here comes another couple who are vaguely my fault. Iruka had walked in, dragging Kakashi, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Sakura turned in her seat to follow his gaze and let out a gasp of mixed shock and glee. You didn't. The Uchiha waved a hand dismissively. I said vaguely my fault, I didn't set them up entirely. It's not like the road to romance has been smooth dash. He was cut off as Sakura leaned across the table and clasped his hand between hers, teal eyes blazing with curiosity. You have to tell me everything. Indra's smile had something of a wolfish quality to it. Let's see how many S-class secrets we can trade before they get here and we have to drop the muffling. I'll start. Saizen Uchiha. The Mizuki's got a secret family. I know Orochimaru's full name. Gaara is actually Sasori's son. Oh, fuck off, said Indra in disbelief before firing back. Sasuke's mother and Naruto's used to be lovers. Bullshit. Kakuza helped invent the international currency system. I stole all his money to fund Suna. Danzo might have taken out Black Zetsu. I accidentally caused a soft coup in Hidden Stone. I semi-accidentally caused a soft coup in the Leaf Village. Since Danzo's out of the picture, that's a given, said Sakura. Shit, here they are. Both veteran shinobi straightened upright from the conspiratorial huddle they'd unconsciously formed, and Indra saw Inari's lips quirking as she struggled to hold back laughter. He dared not speak himself for the same reason as Iruka and Kakashi came closer. Oh hello Indra, said Iruka with his hand around his boyfriend's waist and sporting a very near white button-down compared to Kakashi's matching, albeit disheveled black and white ensemble. The Uchiha nodded a greeting and managed a hello, as Iruka launched into introductions. Indra, I didn't realize you were entertaining someone this evening. It's nice to meet you. Inari, said Indra's companion as she shook his hand. It's nice to meet you Iruka. But, she turned to Kakashi and her demeanor sharpened, suddenly oozing lethality. That would make you Kakashi of the Sharingan, then. It would, said Kakashi cautiously, as Indra bit down on the inside of his cheek in an attempt to contain his laughter. Inari brightened instantly. I say, those pin-ups of you in the bingo book don't do you nearly enough justice. The what? Indra and Inari laughed like hyenas. Oh gods, gasped Inari as she wiped a tear from her eye several minutes later. I'd always wanted to be the one to do that. Kakashi of the Sharingan, intoned Indra in Madara's ominous voice, copy ninja Kakashi, known the world over. Oh, that was priceless. I'm guessing you two have had enough to drink, said the bartender as she slid Inari's second martini away from her. Apologies, said Indra and Iruka at the same time. The Uchiha continued. It's been a long day, so I suppose we're both a bit. He searched for the word. Plastered, offered Kakashi. Punch drunk, said his companion. Tired, yawned Inari. Yes, all of those, said Indra as his empty tankard disappeared as well. We were just catching up as two old friends. The way Kakashi was looking between them suggested he didn't buy it, but Inari was already paying the bartender. We can catch up more next time, she said, patting Indra's scarred cheek. But it's good to see you again. He smiled and waved goodbye with his stump as she strode out the door. You too, old friend. He sat there with a relieved look on his face until Kakashi jabbed him in the ear with a curly straw. His eye focused back in to see the gray-haired ninja carrying a massive cocktail looking at him with concern. So, since I'm guessing that's an old flame, the old part is soon to be missing from your vocabulary. Nope, said Indra. It's just nice to have a friend you know has been through the exact same crazy shit as you. Kakashi raised his glass. I'll drink to that. And with that parting shot, Indra headed home, to collapse into his bed with a smile and the easy sleep of a man who has had some of his burden lifted from his shoulders. Check the description for the links to the author.